Gentle Persuasions. Chapter 1. Cryogenics. When your mind refuses to follow convention, especially when someone seems out of reach, you know you're royally screwed. This was Cryogenics. Born in Thailand, raised in the small village of Pai, she moved to England 2 years after completing her degree in bioscience at Art University. She had dreamed of improving life in her village, but when the chance arose to gain advanced knowledge and access to better laboratories in the UK, she took it, knowing she would one day return to implement her learnings in Pi. But life rarely follows plans. It has its own current, and you either adjust or get swept aside. Kamuk learned this quickly after immigrating. 5 years later, she was one of the brightest bioscientists at the test center of progressed neurogenics. When her mother was diagnosed with dementia, and Kamuk realized it could be hereditary, she shifted focus, determined to find a cure, early detection methods, or even relief for patients with the condition. In London, she had published 4 books, won awards, and been a keynote speaker at multiple medical conferences. Yet she never boasted, never considered herself superior. Her head remained buried in microscopes and lab coats. Kamuk lifted her eyes from the microscope, rubbing them before stretching and jotting notes on the tablet lying on the table. The chatter of her colleagues drew her attention. She rarely indulged in office gossip, and her assistants knew better than to disrupt the lab. But whatever was happening must have been important. Her gaze followed the sound and landed on the cause. Outside her lab stood a tall blonde woman with piercing blue eyes, a sharp nose, and full, perfect lips. Her jawline was sculpted, her presence commanding. Kamuk stared too long, and when the woman's gaze met hers, she quickly busied herself with the tablet. Her heartbeat quickened, hands trembling, yet she tried to appear composed. "Doctor, there is a Miss Nathalia Krusenstolp here to see you," her assistant announced behind her. "I do not have an appointment with her. Please ask her to schedule one," Kamuk replied without looking up. Then a voice, smooth and low, rumbled directly to her core. "I have been trying to get an appointment with you, Dr. Jivakate, but your schedule seems full." Kamuk turned slowly, startled to find Nathalia standing close, her subtle, intoxicating perfume filling the space. She stepped back, caught her breath, then regained neutrality. "I'm sorry, you're not supposed to be here, miss." Nathalia Krusenstolp. "I am not leaving until you hear me out." Her smile was soft, warm. Kamuk's hands trembled again, and she returned to her microscope to compose herself. "Miss Krusenstolp, my assistant will schedule an appointment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have research to finish." Kamuk didn't know that Nathalia Krusenstolp owned half the city and held shares in the test center, and that a woman like Nathalia Krusenstolp did not take no for an answer. "Dr. Jivakate, as I said, I am not leaving until we talk. We can do it here, or I can follow you to your office. The choice is yours." Kamuk exhaled slowly, realizing this was not a battle she wanted in front of her staff. "Very well. We can talk in my office, Miss Krusenstolp," she said, turning toward her office. Nathalia followed, her heels clicking like a metronome in Kamuk's chest. Kamuk pushed the door open, letting Nathalia pass, and closed her eyes just a moment too long, inhaling her presence. Her office on the 30th floor, adjacent to the lab, with the Thames and London sprawled below. She shut the door, steadied her racing heart, walked around her desk, and sat down. Chapter 2. The Proposition. Nathalia settled in front of the old oak desk, crossing her legs and resting her hands on her lap. She waited for Kamuk to sit before speaking. "Dr. Jivakate, I have a proposition. I believe we can work well together." She reached into her bag and slid a business card across the desk. Kamuk leaned forward, eyebrow raised. "Miss Krusenstolp, I do not do propositions. If you want to donate to the lab, be my guest. I only agreed to this meeting to avoid disruptions. If that's the only reason you're here, I have work to do." Nathalia didn't move, didn't shout. Her gaze, known to make seasoned boardroom veterans tremble, bore into Kamuk. The Iron Queen leaned forward, a slow smirk forming. "Dr. Jivakate, you are researching progressive neurological conditions and potential treatments for dementia and ALS. You've been close to a breakthrough several times over the past 3 years, and you've even considered cryogenics. My interest is the latter. Shock flickered across Kamuk's face. This woman clearly knew her work, perhaps more than she should. Miss Krusenstolp, she began, but Nathalia cut her off. Nathalia, please. Kamuk inhaled, looking down at her hands, eyes closed briefly before continuing. Miss Krusenstolp, I do not do private consultations. My research on cryogenics is incomplete and private. So, if you're here for no other reason, this meeting is over. She stood, signaling the end. Nathalia, however, didn't budge. Instead, she leaned back, a confident smile on her lips. Dr. Jivacate, I do not take no for an answer. You'll find my proposal in your emails. I'll wait while you read it. Kamuk, never one to be bullied, stared down at Nathalia. But her determination wavered. Compliance seemed the only way to make her leave. She sat, opened her laptop, and her eyes scanned the document. Her heart raced. The proposal was everything she had hoped for, detailed, considerate of timelines, genetic differences, and, most importantly, a blank check granting full access to whatever she needed for her research. A sharp breath escaped her, and Nathalia noticed. She smirked, uncrossing and recrossing her legs, one eyebrow raised. You seem surprised, Doctor. I do not do anything halfway. Everything you need will be at your disposal, and if I've left anything out, I will rectify it immediately. Kamuk's gaze darted between Nathalia and her laptop. The audacity of this woman, bold, brilliant, irresistible, was infuriating. Pride kept her from showing it. You have the nerve to walk into my lab, thinking money will trap me like a corporate pawn. I am not interested in your proposal, she spat, throat raw. Nathalia rose slowly, giving Kamuk every chance to stop her, or perhaps asserting dominance. She straightened her pristine suit, picked up her bag, and regarded Kamuk with an intensity that made the air hum. Dr. Jivacate, everything you need is in the email. I'll see you in my office first thing in the morning. She left before Kamuk could respond. Kamuk exhaled sharply. The audacity of her. Who does she think she is? Then, softer, almost pleading to herself, come on, Kamuk, this is your lifelong dream. Don't be stupid or dramatic. A low sigh escaped as she sank back into her chair, studying the proposal once more. She knew the decision could be career suicide or sheer brilliance. Head in hands, she prayed it was the latter. Chapter 3. The Acceptance with Conditions. The elevator's doors opened and Kamuk stepped out into a space so polished it made her shoes feel suddenly self-conscious. Glass, marble, and that faint scent of expensive citrus that only very rich people manage to bottle without telling anyone how. Stormpoint International didn't need to show off. The place whispered its power. She walked down the hallway, her heels tapping in a soft, almost apologetic rhythm, completely unlike the unapologetic, thunderous stride Nathalia had showcased in her lab yesterday. Kamuk pushed that memory away like an irritating pop-up ad. A set of large glass doors slid open as she approached. Inside, a long office with floor-to-ceiling windows cupped the skyline in its palms. And at the far end, leaning casually against her desk as though she had invented the very concept of leaning, stood Nathalia Krusenstolp. Immaculate. Sharp. Calm. Dangerous in the way only someone painfully controlled could be. Dr. Jivacate, Nathalia said, her voice lower than yesterday, like honey poured over gravel. Right on time. Kamuk resisted the urge to pull her jacket even tighter around herself. Miss Krusenstolp. A small twitch of amusement curved Nathalia's lips. Nathalia. We're not on a first-name basis, Kamuk replied, staying where she was. A healthy distance. A safe distance. This is business. Everything is business until it's not. Nathalia lifted her chin. Sit, please. Kamuk did not want to sit. Kamuk sat anyway. Her brain whispered, coward. Her heart whispered, shut up, we're panicking. Nathalia crossed the room with slow, easy confidence, a predator who had absolutely no reason to rush. She took the seat opposite Kamuk, but somehow still looked like she was towering above her. I trust you read the proposal, she said. I did. And? It's excessive. Thank you, Nathalia replied, as though Kamuk had just complimented her shoes. Kamuk exhaled sharply. This isn't a compliment, but it is accurate. Nathalia folded one leg elegantly over the other. You want to finish your cryogenics research. I want it completed. The world needs it completed. Her voice softened, barely noticeable, like a crack in a glacier. And I believe you're the only one who can do it properly. Kamuk looked away, her chest tightening. Praise always felt like a trap. Sometimes because it was. I'll accept, she said, steadying her voice. But with conditions. Nathalia's eyebrow arched, that tiny golden crown of challenge. I'm listening. First, Kamuk said, straightening her spine, you do not interfere with my methodology. You give me the resources, and you let me work. Done. Second, my team remains intact. I choose who stays, who joins, and who leaves. Agreed. Third, she hesitated. Just a breath. But Nathalia noticed, of course she noticed. What's the third, Doctor? Nathalia asked softly. No personal involvement, Kamuk said. No manipulation. No special treatment. No tactics. Nathalia's lips curled into that infuriatingly slow, knowing smile. Ah, she murmured. You think I use tactics on you? I know you do, Kamuk shot back. The smile widened, not smug, but intrigued. Warm. A little too warm. I only use tactics when I'm not being heard, Nathalia said. Or when you want something, Kamuk countered. Sometimes those are the same thing. Their eyes locked across the polished desk, scientist and CEO, fear and fearlessness, walls and walls. Two women who spent their entire lives outrunning the same ghost. Kamuk swallowed. My conditions stand. Accepted, Nathalia said without hesitation. Then she leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees. And one condition for me. Kamuk blinked. What? No lying, Nathalia said simply. To me. Or to yourself. Kamuk's stomach dropped a little. Something in her tightened defensively, instinctively. I don't lie. Oh, doctor, Nathalia interrupted, her voice a velvet blade. You lie constantly. Brilliantly. To everyone. Mostly to yourself. She sat back, satisfied. And that stops now. Kamuk looked down at her hands to hide the tremor. She didn't know this woman the truth. This woman wasn't allowed inside her fear. Not her mother's face slipping away piece by piece. Not the nights she lay awake wondering if she'd be next. I'll work on your project, Kamuk said, forcing steel into her voice. Nothing more. We'll see, Nathalia murmured. Kamuk stood. I'll start setting up the facility today. Nathalia rose as well. My assistant will give you a full access pass. Labs, floors, funding approvals, equipment requests. Quite a leash you're giving me. No leash, Nathalia said. A kingdom. Kamuk almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she nodded stiffly and turned toward the door. Doctor. Kamuk stopped. Nathalia's voice softened. You're allowed to want this. Without punishing yourself for it. Kamuk didn't answer. Couldn't answer. She simply walked out, letting the door close behind her like a held breath. Outside, in the quiet corridor, she whispered to herself. Don't fall for her. Don't be stupid. But her heart, traitorous little organ, thumped back. Too late. Chapter 4, Storefronts in Lab Coats. The research facility Stormpoint had assigned to her wasn't a lab, it was a kingdom made of glass and impossible budgets. Rows of brand new cryo chambers. Precision-engineered interfaces. Temperature-regulated corridors humming with quiet, expensive confidence. And an entire wing sealed off for her and her alone. Kamuk stood in the center of it all, hands in her lab coat pockets, pretending she wasn't impressed. She was very impressed. But she would rather swallow a microscope whole than admit it. Her team buzzed around her, 6 scientists who'd followed her through underfunded universities and charity-funded projects where the electricity blinked out every third hour. Now they walked through a room where the air filtration system alone cost more than Kamuk's entire Cambridge scholarship. Dr. Jivacate, said Mara, her lead tech, eyes wide behind her glasses. Is this all ours? Kamuk nodded. Apparently. Like, permanently? Apparently. Mara blinked. Is this what selling your soul looks like? Because honestly, worth it. Before Kamuk could respond, soft footsteps echoed from the entrance, that unmistakable, controlled rhythm she could feel in her spine before she even turned around. Nathalia Krisenstalp. Of course. She walked into the lab not like someone entering a room, but like someone entering a negotiation she intended to win. Her suit was navy today, crisp lines softened by the fall of her blonde hair over one shoulder. Lightning disguised as a person. Kamuk muttered under her breath, "I said no unannounced visits." Nathalia smiled. That smile. "I'm not here to interfere," she said. "Merely observing the start of something important." Her gaze slid over the equipment, the glass chambers, the control panels, then settled back on Kamuk. Something softened in her expression, too fast, too subtle, too dangerous. "You did all this overnight?" Mara asked, pointing at Nathalia like a stunned meerkat. "No," Nathalia replied. "My team did. I merely signed the approvals." "And the blank checks," Kamuk added dryly. "Yes," Nathalia said. "Those two." Kamuk crossed her arms. "I told you I don't need an audience." "You don't," Nathalia agreed. "But your team deserves to see that their work matters to the highest levels. Don't flatter them." "Not flattering," Nathalia said. Acknowledging. There it was again, that calm refusal to bite. That maddening steadiness. It disarmed Kamuk in a way she hated. "Anyway," Mara whispered loudly, dragging two other researchers away from staring at Nathalia like she'd descended from Mount Olympus. "We'll go. Look at the machines." "Yes." Machines. Once they scattered, Nathalia stepped closer to Kamuk. Close enough for her perfume, quiet cedar, cold jasmine, to thread through the sterile air. "You're uncomfortable," Nathalia said gently. "No," Kamuk lied. Her voice betrayed her halfway through the letter O. Nathalia's lips twitched. "You know my condition." "No lying," Kamuk muttered. "Good," Nathalia said. "Then let's try again." Kamuk clenched her jaw. She could face collapsing cells, malfunctioning cryo-integrity, grant committees built of pure misery. But this woman asking for honesty? That was the real apocalypse. "I don't do well with being watched," Kamuk said finally. "Not when I'm working. Not when people expect me to perform." Nathalia nodded, not pitying, not intrusive, just present. "I won't come into the lab again without a request," she said softly. "You have my word." Kamuk blinked. Slowly. Suspiciously. "That's it?" she asked. "Yes." "No argument?" "No. No lecture about leadership synergy or whatever the corporate handbook tells you to say?" Nathalia's smile warmed. "Dr. Jivacate, I don't want to break you. I want to empower you." Kamuk exhaled, too fast, too relieved, and immediately hated how visible the relief felt. "Well," she muttered, "good. Because I already have enough broken parts." Nathalia stilled. A shift. A flicker. A drop in temperature that wasn't cold, just alert, aware, listening in a way Kamuk wasn't used to. "You have none," Nathalia said quietly. "You're not broken. You're burdened." The words hit harder than they should have. Kamuk's throat tightened. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Her voice thinned. "You say that like you know." "I do," Nathalia replied. And for the first time, the very first time, there was a fracture in Nathalia's composure. Something haunted. Something human. Something that didn't belong to Stormpoint or shareholders or CEOs who ruled from glass towers. Something personal. Kamuk opened her mouth. But before she could speak, alarms blared sharply across the lab. Red lights flashed along the ceiling beams. Her team froze. Nathalia stepped back, scanning the room with the instincts of a commander preparing for war. Kamuk shot toward the controls. "Cryo chamber 3, she shouted. "Temperature drop detected." "What does that mean?" Nathalia asked. "It means something is failing," Kamuk snapped, hair whipping back as she pulled open the live data feed. "Something that should not, under any circumstances, fail." Her fingers flew. Then stopped. Her blood went cold. "Nathalia," she said, voice low, steady, deadly. "Someone accessed this system remotely." Nathalia's face hardened. "Impossible." "It isn't." Kamuk turned to her, eyes sharp and bright with a fury Nathalia had never seen. "And they tampered with my research." "You think it was internal?" Of course it was internal. The alarm lights flickered across Nathalia's face, blue eyes turning sharp as knives. A quiet war began in that moment. Not between them, but around them. Stormpoint had enemies. Kamuk had secrets to protect. And someone had just fired the first shot. Nathalia stepped closer, not as a CEO now, but something far more dangerous. Dr. Jivacate, she said softly, I will find who did this. Kamuk met her gaze, two storms colliding. And I, she whispered, will make sure they regret it. Chapter 4. Terms, Truces, and Tectonic Shifts. The elevator slid open with the soft sigh of a creature that knew secrets. And there she was. Nathalia Krusenstolp. Looking every bit like she owned oxygen and only allowed the rest of humanity to borrow it temporarily. She stood by the panoramic window of the 47th floor, sunlight cutting across her like she was carved from frost and intention. When she turned, her eyes locked on Kamuk with that quiet, leonine confidence that made people forget how to blink. Dr. Jivacate, she said, dripping politeness with the same precision she used to gut competition in boardrooms. Right on time. I wasn't aware this was an interview, Kamuk replied, stepping forward, shoulders squared. But since you're keeping track, I'd like it noted that I am 2 minutes early. A single brow from Nathalia, elegant, lethal, arched upward. Noted, she said. Sit. It wasn't a command. It was an inevitability. But Kamuk refused inevitabilities. She chose the chair furthest from Nathalia's desk instead of the one directly across from her. Nathalia smirked. Distance for safety, she mused softly. Or ego. Boundary, Kamuk replied evenly. Something you seem unfamiliar with. Nathalia's laugh was low, warm, unexpected. It hit Kamuk in the chest like a quiet explosion. Let's get to it, Kamuk said before her heart could misbehave further. About the proposal and the lab. Acceptance. Nathalia interrupted, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Acceptance, Kamuk admitted, with additional conditions. After that interruption earlier in the lab, Nathalia inhaled slightly as if savoring those words. Go on. Kamuk slid a document across the desk, neatly typed, annotated, color-coded. Her armor. I want autonomy over the lab you built. Full oversight over all personnel. No corporate interference in methodology or ethics committees. Done, Nathalia said, too fast. Kamuk blinked. I wasn't finished. Then continue, Nathalia purred, and try to surprise me. The irritation flared hot in Kamuk's chest. God, this woman was impossible. Second, Kamuk said, I want all test subjects anonymous. No CEO exceptions. No private clients. No family members. You don't get to volunteer yourself for cryogenic testing. I won't be responsible for. Her voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed it whole. Nathalia did not interrupt this time. Her expression softened, just barely, like a winter thaw no one expected. No exceptions, Nathalia said quietly. Including myself. The honesty in her tone rattled Kamuk worse than the arrogance ever did. She cleared her throat. Third, I want this to remain strictly professional. The air stilled. Nathalia looked at her fully then, eyes searching, sharp, knowing too much. Strictly professional, Nathalia repeated. Is that your condition or your shield? Kamuk's jaw clenched. That's not relevant. Oh, doctor, Nathalia said, leaning back, everything about you is relevant. Kamuk's pulse stuttered. Nathalia stood up, walked around the desk, and offered her hand, professional, poised, deceptively courteous. Then let's finalize it, she said softly. Partners. Strictly professional partners, with boundaries you will enforce, and I will try not to break. Kamuk stood as well, far slower. She took Nathalia's hand. And felt everything. Electricity, annoyance, attraction, fear so old and familiar it tasted like metal. Nathalia's subtle smirk proved she felt it too. Fine, Kamuk said, withdrawing her hand quickly. But, if you cross a line. I'll know, Nathalia murmured. Because you'll glare daggers at me with those eyes of yours. Consider me warned. The faintest flush crept up Kamuk's neck. Let's begin, Nathalia said, stepping back with a gentle sweep of her hand toward the towering glass doors behind her. Your new lab is waiting. Kamuk swallowed. This was it. The beginning of brilliance. The beginning of catastrophe. The beginning of something neither of them had the courage or foolishness to name. But it began. Side by side, in a storm they both pretended wasn't brewing. Chapter 6. The Pulse Beneath the Glass. 6 months they worked tirelessly together. Nathalia keeping her promises and distance, and Kamuk feeling the cold absence. Then one morning, it happened so suddenly they didn't even had time to think. The alarms didn't just scream. They throbbed, a pulse rising from the floors, trembling through the steel frames, echoing off the cryo chambers like the heartbeat of something waking up angry. Kamuk's fingers flew across the interface, shutting down Chamber 3 before the drop could fracture the internal lining. "Seal the wing," she barked. Her team scrambled, Mara sprinting to the auxiliary controls, the others locking down the cryo hall as automated shutters slammed into place with hydraulic force. The temperature stabilized. The alarms didn't. Nathalia hovered behind Kamuk, not crowding, not interfering, but watching with a precision that made Kamuk's skin buzz. "Tell me what you're seeing," Nathalia said softly. Kamuk didn't answer immediately. She was too busy parsing the data, the ghost prints, the brief spike of unauthorized access, the impossible signature that now flickered like a taunt across the screen. "Someone tunneled into the thermal regulator," Kamuk said. "Remotely. And they knew the system well enough to mask the entry." "How well?" Nathalia asked. Kamuk looked up at her, eyes sharp as cut obsidian. "Well enough," she said, "that it wasn't a novice, and it wasn't random." Nathalia's jaw tightened. Her voice dropped to something low and lethal. "Then this is internal." "Yes," Kamuk said. "But not just internal." She toggled the trace. A symbol flashed, an encrypted glyph woven into the data breach. Nathalia froze. Kamuk saw recognition hit her. "What?" she demanded. "What is that?" Nathalia hesitated, the first real hesitation Kamuk had ever witnessed from her. It was a tiny thing. The pause before a blade is drawn. "That," Nathalia said finally, "is an old mark. One Stormpoint hasn't seen in over a decade." Kamuk stared. "You know who did this?" "I know who used to." "Who?" Kamuk insisted. Nathalia exhaled, a long, controlled release, as if she were letting go of something she had sworn never to touch again. "Helix 9, she said. Mara whipped her head around. "No. That division was shut down." Kamuk frowned. "What division?" Nathalia's voice stayed calm, but something inside it cracked, just a hairline fracture. "Helix 9 was a clandestine research unit Stormpoint funded years before I became CEO. Off-the-books cryo experiments. Genetic modifications. They were ambitious." Kamuk narrowed her eyes. "Ambitious is corporate for unethical." "Yes," Nathalia admitted. "And this symbol means?" "That whoever accessed your lab," Nathalia said, "either worked for Helix 9 or wants us to believe they did." The alarms finally cut out. Silence rushed in, too heavy, too deliberate. Kamuk stepped away from the screen. Her mind steadied into that cold, efficient place she only entered during emergencies and heartbreak. "Show me everything," she said. "All records. All personnel files. All internal movements from the last 48 hours. Nathalia shook her head. "No." Kamuk bristled. "Excuse me. You don't get involved in the investigation," Nathalia said softly. "You stay focused on the research. You're too important to risk." Kamuk stepped forward, not backing down, not blinking. "No," she said. "You don't get to shield me. This is my lab. My responsibility. And if someone wants to sabotage my work, they're not just attacking Stormpoint, they're attacking me." Nathalia inhaled sharply. There it was again. The lightning under her ribs. The protective instinct she tried to disguise behind professionalism. "You don't understand what Helix 9 was," Nathalia said quietly. "Then explain it," Kamuk pressed. Nathalia didn't move for a moment. Then she stepped closer, close enough that Kamuk could see the ghost of something old and painful flicker through her eyes. "My father created it," Nathalia said. Kamuk went still. "And I," Nathalia added, voice a whisper carved in glass, "was supposed to inherit it." Kamuk's stomach dropped. "You were part of it?" she asked. "No," Nathalia said. "I shut it down." Burned it out of the company. Buried what I could, rebuilt everything I couldn't. Why? Kamuk asked, softer now. Nathalia's throat tightened. Her voice almost didn't make it out. Because it cost me my mother. The room froze. Not from cold. From truth. Kamuk took a slow breath. She stepped toward Nathalia, not touching, but no longer keeping that careful, bruised distance. Then we're dealing with people who think they own science, Kamuk said. People who think ethics are optional. Yes, Nathalia whispered. And people who hate you. Yes. Kamuk nodded once. Clear. Determined. Then we deal with them together. Nathalia looked at her, a full, steady gaze that carried gratitude, fear, and something that bordered on reverence. Together, she repeated quietly. Kamuk shrugged. Don't get sentimental about it. Nathalia smiled, small, real, devastating. Too late. Before Kamuk could retort, Mara called out from across the lab. Doctor, you need to see this. They turned. On the secondary monitor, a single line of text pulsed in the same encrypted glyph. Kamuk stepped up to it. The message unfurled like a whisper cut into code. We know what you're building. And we're not done. Kamuk's pulse hammered. Nathalia's hand hovered near her elbow, not quite touching, but ready. Storms gathered in that silence. Not in rivalry. In alliance. Because someone had just declared war. And neither Nathalia Krisenstalp nor Kamuk Jivacate were built to lose. Chapter 6. Fractures and Protocols. The lab buzzed with restrained chaos. Kamuk's team had gone silent under the weight of the message on the screen, the encrypted threat pulsing like a heartbeat across the monitor. Every frozen breath in the room felt measured, deliberate, waiting for her command. Kamuk squared her shoulders, her fingers brushing over the touchscreen. First things first, she said, voice taut with controlled anger, we lock down all external connections. No one goes in, no one goes out, digital or physical. Mara nodded instantly, typing commands with a precision that almost made Kamuk forget the fear gnawing at the edges of her mind. Every second mattered. Every lapse could mean disaster for months of research. Nathalia hovered just behind her, silent, assessing. You're certain it's internal? She asked. Yes, Kamuk replied without hesitation. I don't make mistakes like this. Not with this system. Nathalia's expression softened just a fraction, almost imperceptible, but enough to warm the chill in the room. Then we'll root it out, she said. Together. Kamuk's jaw ticked. She hated the word together. She hated the implication of needing help. Yet something in Nathalia's calm, unshakable presence made it easier to accept, though she would never admit that aloud. She ran the diagnostics again, line by line, chamber by chamber. The tampered data had been subtle, nearly invisible to the human eye. But Kamuk had memorized every pulse, every fluctuation. It's clever, she muttered. Too clever. They knew the timings of the automated backups. Whoever did this, they planned to sabotage the most critical phase of cryogenic stabilization. And if they succeed? Nathalia asked quietly, voice almost too soft to hear over the low hum of the systems. Kamuk exhaled slowly. Then months of research go up in smoke, and worse, any samples in that chamber could be ruined beyond recovery. Not to mention the lives on the line if this ever goes public. Nathalia took a careful step closer. You care too much, she said. Not a criticism, but an observation. One that cut through Kamuk's armor deeper than any insult could. Of course I care, Kamuk snapped, immediately regretting the sharp edge in her voice. She softened it, though just barely. It's my responsibility. Always has been. Nathalia's eyes didn't waver. Then let's make sure it stays that way. For the first time in the day, the threat became a mission, a tangible thing they could fight together. The tension between them shifted, subtle but real. They were no longer simply CEO and scientist. They were two people staring down a threat that understood neither sentiment nor hesitation. Kamuk straightened, letting go of her worry for just a moment to glance at Nathalia. Protocol Alpha, she said. All records duplicated, encrypted. Any access outside this lab triggers an immediate lockdown. Mara, make it happen. Mara's fingers flew across the keyboard. Already started, she said, eyes bright with adrenaline. This system doesn't just protect the cryo chambers, it protects everything. From digital sabotage to unauthorized personnel. Whoever did this will regret touching a hair on your lab's head. Kamuk allowed herself a small, tight smile. Good. Keep it tight. Keep it clean. Nathalia's voice was close, low, carrying a weight of something both personal and professional. And if they come back? Kamuk met her gaze, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips despite the stress. Then we'll make sure they wish they hadn't been born. The alarms had stopped, but the threat hadn't. The air thrummed with the knowledge that the war had begun. And for once, Kamuk didn't feel alone in it. Not with Nathalia. Not with the storm building in their wake. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most dangerous thing of all. Chapter 7: Close Calls and Quiet Truths. The lab was quiet now, almost eerily so. The threat had been contained for the moment, but the pulse of adrenaline still ran through Kamuk's veins, unrelenting. She sat at the main console, eyes scanning every readout, every blinking light, every faint anomaly that might signal the saboteur's return. Nathalia leaned against the edge of the desk, arms crossed, the soft click of her heels replaced by the quiet rhythm of her breathing. She wasn't hovering. She wasn't judging. She was just there, like a lighthouse in the storm of Kamuk's obsession. You need to eat, Nathalia said suddenly. The words were casual, but the command behind them was impossible to ignore. Kamuk's fingers didn't stop moving. I don't eat under threat, she muttered. I barely sleep. Nathalia tilted her head, smirk tugging at her lips. You'll collapse if you keep that up. You're brilliant, yes, but you're mortal. And mortal people make mistakes, mistakes that can get months of research ruined. Kamuk scowled. Thanks for the life lesson, Iron Queen. The nickname earned a raised eyebrow. I'm serious, Doctor. Kamuk finally stopped typing and exhaled, shoulders heavy. I know. I just can't trust myself to step away yet. Not after what just happened. Nathalia stepped closer, close enough for Kamuk to feel the heat radiating off her, close enough for every suppressed thought and fear to circle like a hawk over the lab. And yet, here I am, Nathalia said softly. Watching. Waiting. Not interfering. Do you see the irony? Kamuk's throat tightened. She wanted to roll her eyes, wanted to snap back, wanted to act like this was just another day at work. But the truth was, she didn't. Not really. She couldn't. There was something about Nathalia, not her wealth, not her authority, but the way she could see straight through the walls Kamuk had built around herself. The walls she'd built against fear, against trust, against love. You're not supposed to understand me, Kamuk said, more to herself than to Nathalia. Nathalia's smile was softer now, almost tender. No, I'm supposed to respect your boundaries. But I can't ignore them either. Kamuk's hand twitched over the console, uncertain if she wanted to bury herself in work or turn toward the one person who could make all her fears feel less suffocating. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. It was a lull before the next storm. Tell me the truth, Nathalia said finally, voice low, gentle. About your mother. Kamuk froze, heart stuttering. She wanted to look away, to deflect, to hide behind sarcasm and lab protocols. But something in Nathalia's gaze made her pause, made her consider that maybe, for the first time, she could speak without judgment. My mother, Kamuk began, voice barely above a whisper. She's gone further than most. Dementia doesn't just take memory. It takes everything. And sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for it to take me too. Nathalia's hand hovered just inches from the console, not touching, but present. And you hide it, she said softly. Because fear is lonely. Because no one should see you afraid. Kamuk's lips pressed together, eyes stinging. Exactly. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Nathalia leaned in, just slightly, and her voice dropped to a whisper that brushed across Kamuk's ear. You're not alone, Kamuk. Not here. Not with me. The words hit harder than any scientific breakthrough, harder than any alarm or tampered system. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't power play. It was promise. And it terrified Kamuk more than she expected. She swallowed hard, finally looking up, meeting Nathalia's gaze. For a heartbeat, the world outside the lab, the alarms, the threats, even the hereditary curse hovering over their families, seemed to pause. And then the monitors flickered. A tiny blip. A new anomaly. A reminder that the storm wasn't over. Kamuk stiffened, snapping back into action. Mara, check Chamber 7. Now. Nathalia didn't move, didn't speak, just stood behind her, steady. And Kamuk realized, as much as she hated admitting it, she didn't want Nathalia anywhere else but here. Not now. Not ever. Chapter 8, Shadows in the Data. The blip on the monitors was tiny, almost insignificant if you weren't paying attention. But Kamuk didn't just notice, she felt it. Like a pinprick against the skin of her mind. Chamber 7's integrity is dropping, Mara said, fingers flying over the keyboard. It's minor, but it shouldn't be. Kamuk's jaw tightened. Minor now, catastrophic if left unchecked. Lock the remote access. Run diagnostics on every interface from the last 12 hours. Yes, doctor. Mara's voice wavered, betraying the anxiety that Kamuk refused to acknowledge in herself. Nathalia moved closer, watching the screens with that impossible composure that made Kamuk want to throttle her and lean into her at the same time. Someone is testing you, Nathalia said quietly, almost conversationally. They want to see how far they can push before you break. Kamuk didn't answer immediately. Her hands danced over the controls, running protocol after protocol, heart hammering, pulse syncing with the quiet hum of the lab. They won't find anything, she muttered finally. Not while I'm here. You're sure? Nathalia asked. Kamuk didn't look up. I have to be. A pause. A hum from the cooling system. The faint whir of machinery. Then Mara spoke again. Doctor, it's not just Chamber 7. Look at the data flow. Someone's probing every cryo node. And they're covering their tracks. Kamuk froze, eyes narrowing at the schematics on the screen. Her fingers moved faster, analyzing, isolating, identifying patterns. Internal or external? Could be both, Mara said, her voice small. Someone knows the system, intimately. Nathalia's hand rested lightly on the edge of the console. That narrows the list, she said. Her tone was sharp, precise. And I can help you find them. But you have to let me. Kamuk's shoulders stiffened. She hated needing anyone, but especially someone like Nathalia, someone who made her feel exposed, vulnerable in ways no colleague, no friend, no stranger ever had. And yet, the pull of that steady, unwavering presence was magnetic. I don't, Kamuk began, then stopped. She exhaled through her nose, forcing herself to think. Fine. But this is my research. My responsibility. Not yours. Nathalia's gaze softened. Not stealing control. Helping you hold it. That's the difference. Kamuk didn't respond. She couldn't. Her brain was already racing, mapping possible intruders, checking access logs, cross-referencing IP addresses, scanning for anomalies in the cryo protocols. Minutes passed. Hours could have passed. The storm inside her chest, equal parts fear and exhilaration, refused to die down. Then, Mara's voice pierced the quiet. Doctor, look at this. Kamuk leaned over, her eyes scanning the highlighted files on the screen. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to sabotage her work, they were leaving clues. Little breadcrumbs, digital fingerprints that only someone with intimate knowledge of the system could leave. Perfect, Kamuk muttered under her breath, voice tight. This means they're sloppy. Or arrogant. Or both. And that gives us the advantage, Nathalia said, stepping closer, her presence a constant, grounding force. We catch them before they realize we're onto them. Kamuk's gaze flicked up to Nathalia, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself a faint, sarcastic smile. You make it sound so simple. Nathalia smirked back, a slow, deliberate curl of the lips that made the air between them crackle. Nothing about you is simple, Dr. Jivacate. And nothing about me is either. We'll work together. For now. Kamuk exhaled slowly, tension loosening just slightly. Fine. But one wrong move, and I'll freeze more than just your office coffee, Iron Queen. Nathalia laughed softly, the sound warm and low, vibrating against the sterile metal of the lab. I wouldn't expect anything less. Somewhere deep in the hum of Storm Point, alarms quieted. The danger wasn't gone, but for the first time, Kamuk realized she wasn't facing it alone. And maybe, just maybe, that made the hereditary shadows she'd been running from feel a little less terrifying. Chapter 9: Frozen Ambitions. The hum of the lab was different at night. Less chatter, more heartbeat. Kamuk walked the corridors of her cryo kingdom, her steps echoing off glass walls. Each chamber glinted in the dimmed lights, like frozen sentinels holding secrets she both feared and worshipped. She stopped at Chamber 3, the one that had been tampered with, and ran her gloved fingers over the console. Every number, every temperature readout, every algorithm humming in the background told her the same thing: precision was everything. Any lapse, any intrusion, could undo months of progress. Mara hovered nearby, notebook open, eyes wide. "Doctor, even the tiniest fluctuation here, it could compromise the integrity of the cells." Kamuk didn't look up. "I know. That's why I'm here." Her fingers danced across the controls, recalibrating, isolating variables, adjusting thresholds. The screens responded, lines of code snapping into perfect alignment. Her pulse slowed, focus sharpening until every other thought, alarms, corporate espionage, Nathalia's inscrutable smile, dissolved into the background. It was just her, the machines, the science. Mara watched, impressed despite herself. "I've never seen anyone work like this. It's like you're reading the cells' minds." Kamuk finally lifted her gaze, blue eyes sharp, dry humor slipping past the tension. "If I could read minds, Mara, we'd have solved hereditary dementia and ALS yesterday." A laugh escaped Mara, but it died quickly as Kamuk's tone turned serious. "This isn't a game. One misstep and all this, everything we've built here, gone." Mara nodded, understanding the weight she carried, though she could never fully feel it. A soft chime alerted Kamuk to an incoming message on her personal lab tablet. It was Nathalia. "Review the latest data by 0700. Let's discuss anomalies." N. Kamuk rolled her eyes, muttering, "She's relentless." But the corners of her mouth twitched in a way that betrayed excitement. Relentless could be useful. Hours passed in silence. Kamuk isolated each cryo sample, mapped cellular responses to incremental temperature changes, documented neuroregenerative growth, and logged her observations with painstaking detail. She barely noticed Mara stepping back to watch her work, or the hum of the ventilation system syncing with the subtle pulse in her veins. Then came the anomaly. A sample in Chamber 9, one she had checked dozens of times, was showing unexpected synaptic regeneration. Not a glitch. Not contamination. Genuine cellular improvement beyond predicted parameters. Kamuk's breath hitched. "Mara, do you see this?" Mara leaned in, eyes scanning the readout. "Doctor, that's unreal. That's beyond anything we've hypothesized." Kamuk's fingers hovered above the console. "It's a breakthrough," she whispered, a threading through her voice. "But it's also delicate. If I miscalculate, it could collapse entirely." And there it was, the thin line she walked every day, the brilliance of discovery, the fear of hereditary shadows looming over her, the knowledge that someone, somewhere, might want to claim it for themselves. The lab door opened quietly, and Nathalia's silhouette appeared. Not as a corporate overlord this time, but as someone who understood the gravity of the moment. She stepped inside without a word, watching Kamuk with that steady, unwavering gaze. "You're onto something," Nathalia said softly. "I can feel it. You just need the space to see it through." Kamuk's chest tightened. "I do need space," she admitted, voice low. "Because this work, it's mine. Every success, every failure, mine." Nathalia nodded, stepping back just enough to give her the room, but close enough to feel the tension, the drive, the raw, unfiltered ambition pulsing through the air. Kamuk returned to the console, eyes blazing with focus. She had no time for distractions, not from corporate spies, not from her fears, not even from the magnetic pull of Nathalia's presence. And yet, somewhere deep down, she knew this was the moment that would define everything. Every calculation, every sleepless night, every guarded heartbeat, It was all building toward the moment when her research, her life, and her trust in another human would collide. And in that quiet, humming lab, among the frozen ambitions and fragile hope, Kamuk allowed herself one fleeting thought. Maybe, just maybe, I'm not alone in this. Chapter 10. The First Test. The hum of the cryo chambers was louder today, or maybe it was just Kamuk's heartbeat echoing against glass and steel. Every alarm, every beep, every digital flicker carried a weight she hadn't felt before: anticipation, fear, excitement, and the unspoken pressure that someone, somewhere, was watching. She stood before Chamber 9, fingers poised over the console. Mara hovered silently, almost afraid to breathe. Kamuk didn't glance at her. Not yet. Focus had to be absolute. Ready? Mara whispered. Kamuk's lips twitched into a half-smile. I was born ready. The sample in Chamber 9 had shown unprecedented synaptic growth during the night cycle. The first real test would be to warm it incrementally, bring it back to near physiological temperature, and observe how the neurons reacted. One false move and everything would collapse. She keyed in the sequence. Temperatures rose in gradual steps, the monitors displaying cellular responses in color-coded brilliance. Every synapse fired in patterns that made her chest tighten with awe. Mara broke the silence. Doctor, the regeneration. It's accelerating. Faster than the models predicted. Kamuk's eyes didn't leave the screens. I know. I've never seen anything like it. Not even in theoretical simulations. And then it happened. A spike. Unexpected, unpredictable. The system flickered. Red warning lights blinked faintly. Kamuk's pulse surged. Shut down the auxiliary feed. No. Mara's fingers flew over the keyboard. Alarm silenced. The spike calmed. But Kamuk didn't relax. Every neuron in her brain screamed caution. You see, Mara asked, voice trembling. This could be revolutionary. It has to be. Kamuk exhaled slowly. Yes, but every revolution has its casualties. She stepped back from the chamber, pacing the floor. Her mind raced, calculations, probabilities, contingencies. Every step forward could trigger a chain reaction she couldn't control. The lab door opened quietly. Nathalia entered without knocking. Her presence, calm and powerful, didn't startle Kamuk this time, but it drew her attention like a magnet. They'll be watching, won't they? Kamuk asked, not turning around. Nathalia's gaze swept the lab. Corporate eyes, competitors, opportunists, yes. But right now, that's irrelevant. Kamuk finally faced her. Irrelevant? Nathalia, if someone wants this research, they'll take it. They'll ruin it. They'll ruin everything. Nathalia stepped closer, voice low but unwavering. Then we make sure they can't. You focus on the science. I'll handle the rest. Kamuk's jaw tightened. Part of her wanted to argue, wanted to push Nathalia away, prove she didn't need anyone. But the part that feared the hereditary shadows, the part that understood how fragile and fleeting breakthroughs were, that part wanted to nod, to lean just a fraction closer and admit trust. She didn't. Instead, she focused back on the monitors. The synapses continued their regeneration. Slowly, deliberately, Kamuk's fingers adjusted the feed. Each neuron that fired felt like a tiny victory, a step closer to a cure, a step closer to defying the fate she had been born to fear. Nathalia watched quietly, hands folded, not interfering, not because she couldn't, but because she understood the sanctity of this moment. Minutes passed, stretching into hours. The lab became a cathedral of possibility. Each breakthrough whispered of hope, each danger reminded them of fragility. Finally, Kamuk leaned back, exhaustion lining her features, a rare smile flickering across her lips. It worked. For now, at least, it worked. Nathalia's blue eyes softened. For now, she echoed. But there was something deeper in her tone: admiration, recognition, and perhaps something else, something neither would name yet. Kamuk didn't turn to meet her gaze. She focused on the chamber, on the frozen neurons that held the promise of a future, and on the fragile thrill of knowing she might just be capable of rewriting destiny. Outside, London's skyline glittered like a promise, cold, distant, unyielding. Inside, in the heart of the lab, two storms of will and ambition found a precarious rhythm. And for the first time, Kamuk allowed herself to imagine, maybe, just maybe, we'll make it through this together. Chapter 11. Synapses and Subtext. The lab smelled faintly of ozone and cedar, a strange combination Kamuk had come to associate with Nathalia's presence. Kamuk hovered over Chamber 12, checking the temperature gradient with meticulous precision. Mara and two other techs scurried around, jotting notes and adjusting readings, but Kamuk barely noticed. "You do realize," Mara whispered, leaning closer, "that she's been here for an hour and hasn't touched a single machine. She's just standing there." Kamuk didn't look up. "She's watching. That's what people like her do." "People like her?" Mara echoed. "Multi-billionaire power players with eyes sharper than scalpels," Kamuk said dryly. "And apparently a nose for cedar and subtle intimidation." Mara snorted. "You mean for subtle, what?" Kamuk's fingers never faltered over the console. "Intimidation. Don't ask me to explain why smelling perfume feels like a threat." From behind, a soft laugh, low, teasing, and impossibly close, made her chest tighten. "Perfume as a weapon?" Nathalia's tone was light, but there was a hint of challenge beneath it. Kamuk shot a glare over her shoulder. "You're in a lab, not a perfume counter. Back off." Nathalia's smile lingered. "I'm observing, learning from the master at work." Kamuk's jaw twitched. "Master at work? You mean someone who almost blew up Chamber 9 last week?" "I prefer experimental brilliance," Nathalia corrected, stepping closer until Kamuk could feel the heat from her presence without looking up. Kamuk swallowed. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." They worked in a tense, precise rhythm. Kamuk adjusted the feed, Nathalia watched the monitors, and for brief stretches, the room felt quiet enough to hear the neurons firing. "You know," Nathalia said after a pause, voice softening, "I could step back. Wait in my office, give you privacy." Kamuk didn't turn, but her fingers hesitated on the controls. "I'm not sure if I want that. And I'm certainly not sure if I want you to know that." Nathalia didn't respond immediately. She just watched. The silence stretched, heavy with unsaid things, and Kamuk could almost hear her own heartbeat over the hum of machinery. "Fine," Kamuk muttered finally, "but don't get in the way." "Seriously." "I won't," Nathalia said. But the softness in her tone betrayed the lie. Another spike hit Chamber 12, subtle this time, but enough to set Kamuk's nerves alight. She adjusted the temperature feed, her hands precise, fingers dancing over the controls like a pianist coaxing harmony from chaos. "Careful," Nathalia said quietly. "One wrong move and—" "Don't finish that sentence," Kamuk snapped, though her cheeks warmed. "You're lucky," Nathalia said softly, "that I trust your hands." Kamuk froze for a heartbeat, the sarcastic mask threatening to crack. "Lucky," she repeated, voice low. "I think it's terrifying." "Then, I prefer terrifying," Nathalia replied, leaning just enough that the space between them shrank. "Terrifying means you care." Kamuk shot her a glance. "I care about the research. And the neurons. And, maybe, don't take this the wrong way, not much else." Nathalia's smile curved, knowing and patient, but still teasing. "Not much else? That's generous." Kamuk turned back to the chamber, fingers flying. She couldn't afford to give more, not yet. But she felt it, a shift, a subtle tether forming in the space between them. Chemistry without consent. Trust without permission. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by the hiss of cryovalves and the occasional murmur of data. Mara whispered observations, Kamuk corrected her, and Nathalia occasionally offered a calm, insightful note, always precise, never overbearing. At the end of the day, Kamuk finally stepped back, wiping sweat and tension from her brow. "Chamber 12 is stable," she announced. "And none of you set anything on fire. That's a win." Nathalia's eyes softened as she stepped closer. "You did beautifully today. All of it." Kamuk snorted, brushing off the compliment. "You have a weird way of showing it. You mean like standing close and breathing the same air?" Nathalia countered, with the faintest smirk. Kamuk's jaw tightened. That's professional, right? Totally professional. Yes, Nathalia said, voice low, almost intimate. Professional. For now. Kamuk rolled her eyes, but the warmth in her chest betrayed her sarcasm. For the first time in a long time, she felt something akin to connection. Dangerous. Terrifying. And entirely undeniable. Outside the lab, the city pulsed with the usual rhythm of London. Inside, among neurons and cryochambers, two storms found a rhythm all their own, a rhythm of science, sarcasm, and a subtle, simmering intimacy neither dared name. Chapter 12. Precision and Provocation. The lab smelled of liquid nitrogen and ambition, and Kamuk moved through it like a general surveying her battlefield. Every cryochamber, every monitor, every delicate sensor was a puzzle piece of a larger plan, one she had meticulously crafted. Mara hovered at her elbow, eyes bright behind thick glasses. Doctor, Chamber 6, temperature variance. Minor, but noticeable. Kamuk adjusted the controls with a faint frown. Minor doesn't exist. Not here. Not when we're talking cryogenics. A soft exhale made her pause. Nathalia had been standing behind her, hands tucked behind her back, watching, observing, waiting. Always watching, but never interfering unless absolutely necessary. You really don't like being watched, Nathalia said, voice smooth like dark chocolate, teasing yet calm. Kamuk didn't look up. I said that already. And I meant it. Nathalia leaned slightly, close enough for Kamuk to feel the faint heat radiating off her body, subtle cedar mingling with cold jasmine again. And yet here you are, letting me stay. Kamuk's fingers hovered over the console. I'm letting you stay because you're annoying if you follow me out. That, and my assistants tend to trip over themselves when they see you. A low chuckle. I'll take what I can get, Nathalia said, tone softening just enough to make Kamuk's stomach twist. The room hummed with quiet energy, a blend of machines and unspoken tension. Kamuk moved from chamber to chamber, Mara and two others following her lead, checking seals, calibrating readings, taking meticulous notes. Nathalia observed, occasionally offering insight, never overstepping, yet her presence drew attention to every movement, every calculation. Chamber 9 is stabilizing, Mara reported, voice tight. Looks like the remote access issue hasn't recurred. Kamuk exhaled, but didn't relax. It hasn't. Yet? Stay sharp. This isn't over. Nathalia stepped closer, lowering her voice. Do you ever sleep? Not enough, Kamuk muttered. And I don't trust people who think they can waltz in here and fix everything. Nathalia's lips quirked. I don't waltz. I observe. Precision. Like you. Kamuk's hands froze. She hated that the words made her pulse quicken. She didn't trust herself with this, not with Nathalia. Not with anyone. But the draw was undeniable. Do you ever pause? Nathalia pressed, just close enough for Kamuk to feel her presence without turning. I pause when the lab explodes, Kamuk shot back, sarcastic edge sharpening, hiding the flinch in her chest. Nathalia's laugh was low, teasing. Touché. But you paused for me just now, didn't you? Kamuk's jaw tightened, fingers flying over the controls to hide the blush threatening her composure. You're imagining things. And stop lurking. I'm not lurking, Nathalia said softly, stepping closer, the warmth of her presence brushing Kamuk's shoulder. I'm supporting. Kamuk's heart stuttered. She wanted to turn, wanted to tell Nathalia to step back, wanted to maintain control, but the tightrope between irritation and fascination was collapsing fast. You're dangerous, Kamuk muttered, keeping her eyes on the readouts. For me. For everyone around you. And yet you let me stay, Nathalia whispered, voice brushing Kamuk's ear. I like to think of it as a calculated risk. Kamuk's fingers stilled, and for a single, suspended moment, the hum of machines faded. Two storms in one room. Sarcasm and science, fear and fascination, heat and cold colliding in a precise, delicate balance. Then Mara cleared her throat. Doctor. Chamber 11 is spiking. We need to recalibrate immediately. Kamuk blinked, the moment shattered. She barked orders, Mara moved, Nathalia watched, perfectly still, perfectly precise, and the lab roared back to life. And Kamuk realized, with a grudging, terrified clarity, that this was their rhythm. Chemistry and chaos. Intimacy hidden behind sarcasm and data. A bond neither dared to name, but both could feel. Outside the lab, London carried on unaware. Inside, amidst the neurons and cryo chambers, Kamuk and Nathalia navigated a storm far more dangerous than any machine failure, and neither of them would admit they liked it. Chapter 13. The Breakthrough. The lab smelled of ozone and heated metal, and Kamuk's heart raced faster than any of the centrifuges spinning on their own schedules. This is it, she whispered, eyes fixed on the monitor. Chamber 14. Stability is holding for 72 hours straight. 72 hours. Mara's jaw dropped. Are you serious? 72 hours? That's never. Yes. It's serious, Kamuk snapped, though her voice carried a tremor she tried to mask. We've achieved full cryogenic stability without cell degradation. The protocol works. Nathalia leaned against the edge of the bench, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. And you didn't tell me you were this brilliant? Kamuk shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. I didn't tell you because this isn't about you. Not about me? Nathalia's eyes danced, catching the fluorescent light. You're the one who just smiled like a kid at Christmas when the results popped up. Kamuk ignored her, scanning the data. Every reading, every anomaly, every perfectly calibrated variable was a testament to months of sleepless nights, obsessive calculations, and sheer stubbornness. Doctor, the neurogenic samples, Mara interrupted. We can start testing controlled revival scenarios now. With your supervision. Kamuk exhaled slowly, the tiniest smirk tugging at her lips despite herself. Yes, prepare the samples. But no mistakes. Not today, not ever. Nathalia moved closer, her presence a steady warmth behind Kamuk's shoulder. I've watched your entire team function at their peak, but you shine brightest when there's a challenge. Fear doesn't paralyze you. It sharpens you. Kamuk's fingers twitched over the controls, and she muttered, Don't what? Nathalia's tone was soft, teasing. Don't try to psychoanalyze me, Kamuk said, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of admiration. Nathalia's smirk deepened. Wouldn't dream of it. Just impressed by the storm I've been allowed to watch. The atmosphere thickened, charged. It wasn't just the breakthrough in cryogenics, it was the unspoken acknowledgement that two driven people, both carrying fears and burdens no one else could understand, had found some sort of rhythm together. Kamuk finally allowed herself a slow exhale. We've done it. This is a real breakthrough. Congratulations, Nathalia said, voice low. Not just on the science, but on letting someone see that spark behind your walls. Kamuk's pulse skipped, but she focused back on the monitors. Keep the comments to yourself. I work better angry than flattered. Noted, Nathalia replied, though her smirk hinted she might not honor that. And as the lab hummed, filled with machines and the quiet murmurs of her team, Kamuk felt it, the smallest shift in her universe. The breakthrough wasn't just cryogenics, it was the first crack in the armor she had built so carefully around her heart. Chapter 14. The Threat. The hum of the lab had shifted, subtle at first, a vibration under the polished surfaces, the kind that set Kamuk's nerves on edge. Something's off, she muttered, eyes scanning the monitors. The readings from Chamber 14 were stable, too perfect. Mara, frowning, adjusted a sensor. I don't see anything unusual, Doctor. Everything's within expected parameters. Kamuk's jaw tightened. That's what they want you to think. Nathalia appeared at her shoulder, leaning over the console, her sharp blue eyes narrowing. Do you suspect sabotage? Kamuk didn't answer immediately. Her fingers hovered over the interface, running through every protocol, every log, every access point. Not just a suspicion. I know someone accessed the system. And they didn't leave a trace. Nathalia's expression hardened. Who? And why? Kamuk's gaze flicked to her. Someone wants to prove I can fail. Or worse, someone wants this research for themselves. And they're patient enough to play a long game. A low beep sounded from the far side of the lab. Kamuk spun, adrenaline sharpening her movements. The lights flickered once, twice. Chamber 9, she barked. Temperature fluctuation. Immediate override. Mara dashed to the controls, but Kamuk intercepted her. Not yet. Let me check the feed. The camera angle revealed the impossible, a minor misalignment in the cryo interface, just enough to compromise a sample if not corrected immediately. Nathalia's voice was low, almost intimate, even as the tension clawed the air. You're calm under fire. Terrifyingly calm. Kamuk exhaled, voice clipped. Experience. Years of labs that could explode from one misstep. Now, watch and learn. Her fingers danced over the console. Override sequences, thermal recalibrations, and emergency protocols executed with precision honed from countless late nights and failures. Chamber 9 stabilized. A silence fell, broken only by the hum of the machines returning to normal. Nathalia stepped closer, placing a hand near Kamuk's elbow. They're testing you. Seeing how far you'll go to protect your work. Kamuk's lips twitched, a sarcastic quip forming, but she swallowed it. Well, they're going to be disappointed. I don't break. Yet, Nathalia murmured, her gaze lingering in a way that made Kamuk's pulse quicken. Don't tempt me, Kamuk snapped, turning back to the screens. I have work to do. And a very real chance someone is watching my next move. Mara looked between them, eyes wide. Do we call security? Not yet, Kamuk said. We handle this ourselves first. Whoever's behind it will get exactly what they deserve. And I promise, I don't forgive easily. Nathalia's hand brushed against Kamuk's shoulder, almost by accident, almost too deliberate. Good, she said. Because I have a feeling you'll need backup. And I won't let anyone hurt this, or you. Kamuk's chest tightened at the unspoken weight in Nathalia's words. A warmth threading through the adrenaline and fear. The lab hummed again. Machines, data feeds, cryo chambers, all alive. But so was the tension. So were they. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the glass walls, the threat lingered. Watching. Waiting. But Kamuk knew one thing for certain. Whoever it was, they were about to learn the hard way that the fiercest storms were not in the cryo chambers. They were standing right here. Chapter 15. Countermoves. Kamuk sat in the control room, fingers steepled, eyes scanning the cascade of data streaming across the screens. Every temperature readout, every access log, every alert that had gone off in the past 24 hours played through her mind like a sinister symphony. Mara hovered behind her, holding a tablet like it was a life raft. So, what's the plan? We can't just wait for them to make the next move. Kamuk didn't answer immediately. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating probabilities, tracing possible intrusions, hypothesizing motives. The thing about someone targeting her research? They had to know more than they should, and that meant inside information. First, she said finally, her voice clipped but controlled, we isolate the network. Every terminal, every interface, every access point. Offline until we know exactly where the breach is. Mara blinked. Offline? That's drastic. Necessary, Kamuk snapped, then softened. Do it carefully. I don't want false alarms triggering more panic. From across the room, Nathalia leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, her blue eyes sharp. You're planning to play chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Kamuk glanced at her, smirk tugging at her lips despite the tension. Better than losing at both. Nathalia stepped closer, the quiet warmth of her presence threading around Kamuk's nerves like a live wire. Do you want my help? I want your patience, Kamuk said, not looking at her. And your silence. Nathalia raised an eyebrow. I see. Cold, sarcastic, brilliant. Just like the lab said. Kamuk rolled her eyes. Stop flattery. Or at least make it believable. Her hands flew across the console again, initiating encrypted protocols, rerouting data through redundant systems, and planting monitoring scripts that would flag even the tiniest anomaly. Every move was calculated, every sequence deliberate. You're thorough, Nathalia murmured, watching Kamuk with an intensity that made Mara glance nervously between them. I have to be, Kamuk said, voice low, deadly. If I miss something, it's not just a career on the line. It's years of research. My mother. Your grandfather. Nathalia stiffened for a fraction of a second, a recognition unspoken of the stakes. Then she leaned back, letting Kamuk work, letting the storm of her own fears and obsessions play out in silence. Minutes stretched into hours. Alerts pinged. Anomalies appeared and vanished under Kamuk's scrutiny. She traced every suspicious access, cross-referenced identities, and finally isolated a pattern. There, she whispered. Someone's trying to synchronize access with chamber recalibrations. There, timing it to the maintenance cycles. Mara gasped. They're predictable. Kamuk's lips pressed into a thin line. Predictable, yes. Arrogant, yes. Stupid enough to think no one would notice? Absolutely. She initiated a counter-sequence, a digital trap laced with decoys and false entries. Whoever was watching would think they were succeeding while Kamuk quietly traced their digital fingerprints. Nathalia's voice was low, almost intimate, as she murmured from behind her. You enjoy this, don't you? Hunting. Kamuk didn't look up. I enjoy surviving, she said. Big difference. But Nathalia's hand found its way to the back of Kamuk's chair, a grounding, subtle, dangerous. Surviving is easier when you don't do it alone. Kamuk's pulse jumped, fingers still dancing across the interface. She didn't turn, didn't answer, but the warmth of Nathalia's proximity threaded into the tension, a silent promise that whatever storms came, she wouldn't be facing them alone. The trap was set. The breach was contained. Now all that remained was to wait and watch, and when the saboteur moved, they would step straight into Kamuk's storm. And Kamuk never missed a storm. Chapter 16. The Trap. The lab was quiet, too quiet. Kamuk's eyes flitted between the monitors, the rows of cryo chambers, and the digital footprints she had meticulously traced for the past 48 hours. Every ping, every access attempt, every false path she had laid out for the saboteur was a thread in the web she was spinning. Mara hovered at her shoulder, tablet in hand, trying to keep pace. Are you sure about this? He could notice and retaliate. Kamuk didn't look up. If he notices, he's sloppy. If he doesn't, he walks right into our trap. The footsteps were familiar, deliberate, measured, confident. But this time, Nathalia was already beside her, sharp and alert, a shadow of steel behind the warmth Kamuk secretly craved. You have him where you want him? Nathalia asked, voice low, teasing in that controlled way that made Kamuk's pulse jitter. Kamuk smirked without turning. Right where I can watch him. And right where he thinks he's untouchable. A ping sounded on the console. One of the false entries Kamuk had seeded had been accessed. A small grin tugged at her lips. He's in the system. Now. Nathalia's eyes glinted, calculating. Time to play. The saboteur, the man who had tried to undermine years of work for personal gain, believed he was walking into an empty lab. He had been a board member once, part of the old regime at Stormpoint International. Comfortable with secrets, accustomed to power. Arrogant enough to think he could outsmart Kamuk Jivacate. He didn't notice the live feeds, the silent cameras, the digital breadcrumbs that Kamuk had left for him. He didn't notice the subtle shift in temperature, the faint hum that betrayed the lockdown sequence initiating. Kamuk's fingers hovered over the final command. Mara watched her, breath held. Nathalia leaned close, voice almost a purr. Go ahead. End it. With a decisive press, the locks engaged. The doors sealed with a soft hiss. The lights dimmed, red indicators flashing subtly across the lab. Every terminal he had touched was now a record of his intrusion, and every exit was closed. Hello, Kamuk's voice echoed through the intercom, calm, collected, but sharp as a scalpel. I've been expecting you. The man froze. Panic flashed across his face as he spun around. What? How? Step aside, Nathalia's voice cut through. She had stepped forward, elegant, commanding, with that impossible presence that made men falter. You're not leaving. Not today. Not ever. Kamuk's eyes narrowed. You thought you could sabotage my research, steal the work, and hide behind your old title. You underestimated me. The man stumbled back, scanning the lab for escape. Mara pressed a sequence on her tablet, Every door, every corridor, every external interface sealed. They were contained. Nathalia's hand hovered over her own comm device. Security's on the way. You're about to have a very long conversation with the law. The saboteur's arrogance crumbled into disbelief and fear. You can't do this. I'm. Kamuk leaned slightly forward from behind the console, voice icy, precise. You're arrested for unauthorized access, tampering with research, and corporate espionage. You will answer to every action you've taken here, and Stormpoint will see to it that you never touch anything of value again. Nathalia's lips curved, just slightly. And if you ever think about trying again, well, let's just say you won't make it past the threshold. The old board member slumped in resignation as security arrived, efficient and silent, guided by Nathalia's team. Kamuk watched, satisfaction masked under her usual stoic exterior. Mara exhaled. That was brilliant. Kamuk didn't smile. Not yet. We're not done. Someone else might try. But for now, one storm cleared. Nathalia stepped closer, her hand brushing Kamuk's shoulder in a fleeting, electric gesture. And you handled it like a storm herself. Proud of you, Kimu. Kamuk felt her pulse spike, heat rushing through her chest. She turned sharply, masking her reaction with a sarcastic, "Don't get sentimental on me now. We still have work." Nathalia only smirked. Wouldn't dream of it. The lab hummed back to life. The alarm ceased. The threat was gone, but the tension, the unspoken pull, lingered. Storms cleared, yes. But some storms never truly ended. Chapter 17. Testing the Breakthrough. The lab smelled of antiseptic, electronics, and that faint tang of possibility. Kamuk stood before the cryo chamber, her eyes scanning the display panels as her fingers danced over the interface. Every metric, every calculation, every readout confirmed what she had dared to hope. The breakthrough was real. Mara hovered nearby, barely daring to breathe. This could actually work? Kamuk's lips twisted in a sarcastic half-smile. Could work? Mara, if this works, we rewrite the damn rulebook on neurodegenerative diseases. And yes, it's terrifyingly, dangerously real. The soft sound of heels clicked across the polished floor. Nathalia appeared at the edge of the chamber, her presence both calming and incendiary. Terrifying? I prefer revolutionary. Kamuk blinked. Semantics. Revolutionary still means someone could die. Nathalia arched an eyebrow, arms crossed, observing. I trust you to minimize the dying part. Mostly. Kamuk's fingers flew over the controls. Mostly. That's comforting, actually. The chamber hissed softly as the trial subject, a specially cultured tissue sample, genetically engineered to mirror human neuronal decay, was gently encased. Kamuk held her breath. Mara held hers. Even Nathalia, for once, didn't quip. The display panels lit up with neural activity. The readings surged, hesitated, then surged again, this time in a way that indicated repair, regeneration, stabilization. Mara's eyes went wide. Is it reversing? Kamuk's voice was low, fierce. It's repairing. Faster than any model predicted. I think we've actually done it. Nathalia stepped closer, voice soft, but laced with the familiar tease. You look almost happy. Dangerous for a scientist. Kamuk shot her a glare that was equal parts irritation and acknowledgement. Don't test me today, Krisenstalp. I have enough variables without you adding chaos. Nathalia smirked. Chaos is my specialty. And besides, I'm just here to witness genius. The tissue sample shimmered under the controlled light of the chamber, the neural pathways knitting together with precision. Kamuk's fingers hovered, almost afraid to adjust anything, as though a single twitch could undo months of work. You've done it, Nathalia murmured. Her tone carried awe, but there was that undercurrent, that tension, the unspoken intimacy threading between admiration and desire. And yet you still act like it's nothing. Kamuk smirked, the way she always did when she wanted to hide how much the words affected her. That's the problem with breakthroughs. They make your heart race, but you can't let anyone see. Not even you. Nathalia stepped closer, dangerously close. Not even me, huh? Kamuk's pulse jumped. She cleared her throat, stepping slightly back. Not even you, Krisenstolp. We have work to do, and you're a distraction. You think I'm a distraction? Nathalia's eyes narrowed, teasingly sharp. Doctor, I'm the only one keeping you from collapsing into your obsession. Consider me protective supervision. Kamuk rolled her eyes, but the twitch of a smile betrayed her. Protective, huh? I'll add it to the list. Mara, sensing the chemistry like a scientist sensing a sudden reaction in a volatile experiment, muttered, You two are going to give me heart palpitations. Ignoring her, Kamuk returned to the chamber. Focus, people. One successful test doesn't mean the world is safe yet. Repeatability, monitoring, and control. That's what matters. Nathalia lingered at her side, unmovable, a quiet force of calm and chaos all at once. And I'll make sure nothing or no one interferes. You do the magic, Doctor. Kamuk swallowed, trying to ground herself. The breakthrough, the adrenaline, the proximity, all of it made her aware in a way she wasn't used to. But she forced her hands to steady, her voice to remain sharp. Magic? No. Science. Always science. Yet the warmth creeping from Nathalia's presence lingered longer than any breakthrough metrics. It was a dangerous, thrilling equation Kamuk hadn't yet figured out. And for the first time in months, she didn't care if she failed, not completely. Because someone was there to catch her if she fell, even if neither would admit it. Chapter 18, The Slip. The lab was quiet, but not in the sterile, hum of machines way. This quiet had tension, charged air that made Kamuk aware of every breath, every step, every small heartbeat echoing in the room. She was perched on the edge of a stool, adjusting the fine-tuning of the cryo chamber controls. Nathalia stood behind her, eyes scanning the same readings, offering the occasional suggestion, a subtle touch of her hand brushing Kamuk's shoulder as she pointed to a parameter. Kamuk flinched, but not entirely. You're close enough to make me nervous, Krisenstolp. Nathalia's lips twitched. Nervous? About science or me? Kamuk's eyes flicked up, meeting Nathalia's calm, blue gaze. Her throat tightened. Both. Keep your distance, please. Nathalia leaned in slightly, dangerously so, the scent of cedar and jasmine threading around her. Oh, Doctor, I think you secretly enjoy the closeness. Admit it. Kamuk's fingers stilled on the controls. I do not. Sure, Nathalia said softly, her voice lowering, teasing yet intimate. Not even when your hair is messy, your cheeks are flushed, and you're completely absorbed in your genius? Kamuk's pulse betrayed her, fluttering in the tight cage of her chest. She forced herself to focus on the chamber, but the warmth of Nathalia lingering near her was impossible to ignore. Flattered, but irrelevant, Kamuk muttered. Her voice was sharper than intended. Then it happened. A slip. A hand brushed hers, accidental, or perhaps not. Kamuk's breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. Her heart thudded audibly in her ears. Nathalia's hand lingered a moment too long before retreating, and she gave that sly smirk Kamuk despised yet couldn't resist. I see. You do have feelings about proximity. Kamuk spun in her stool, glaring, though her eyes betrayed the slightest shimmer of acknowledgement. Feelings? No. Awareness, maybe. And irritation. Definitely irritation. Awareness and irritation, Nathalia repeated softly, stepping closer again. Fascinating. Very human. Kamuk's fingers clenched the edge of the control panel, knuckles whitening. I am human, Krisenstolp. I am always human. I just don't advertise it. Nathalia leaned in slightly, close enough for Kamuk to feel the warmth radiating off her. And yet, you're letting me see a fraction. Just a fraction. Kamuk's heart betrayed her further. She swallowed hard, trying to ground herself in science, in numbers, in the objective certainty of her work. Focus, Dr. Jivacate. Dear work. Ignore the distractions. Distractions, Nathalia echoed with a low chuckle, her voice brushing Kamuk's ear. I think you secretly invite them. Kamuk froze. That slip, that fleeting intimacy, had already embedded itself, a spark between them neither could deny. She clenched her jaw, trying to shove the flutter in her chest back into oblivion. I invite nothing, she said finally, her voice brittle but firm. And you, go supervise the systems. Keep your hands to yourself. Nathalia's smirk deepened, and she finally stepped back, hands crossed, regal and teasing. Very well, Doctor. But don't pretend you weren't aware of me. I'll take the victory in small steps. Kamuk returned to the chamber controls, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the parameters. The science was still there, tangible and controlled. The human mess of desire, of proximity, of unspoken tension, lingered like static in the air, unavoidable, dangerous, and thrilling. Somewhere deep inside, she realized, breakthroughs weren't only for science. And perhaps, just perhaps, some risks were worth taking. Chapter 19: Cracks and Truths. The lab was quieter than usual, the machines humming a steady, hypnotic rhythm. Kamuk stood at the console, reviewing the latest data. Nathalia leaned against the edge of the workstation, arms crossed, observing, but this time, not like a CEO overseeing operations. Not like a figure of untouchable authority. This time, she was human. Kamuk felt it instantly, the subtle difference. The way Nathalia's brow furrowed at an anomaly, the slight tension in her jaw as she considered the implications. No armor. No ice. Just presence. You're quiet, Kamuk said, not looking up. I'm letting you work, Nathalia replied softly. You seem focused. Focused. Kamuk laughed quietly, a short, bitter sound. Focused, yes. Afraid of mistakes, terrified of losing everything we've built, yes. But apparently, I can still hear commentary from an observer. Nathalia stepped closer, her voice lowering, intimate. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you brilliant. It makes you human. You hide it too well, Kamuk. Kamuk froze. The use of her first name on Nathalia's lips. Her fingers hovered over the controls, heart hammering. Do not, she said, voice sharp, brittle. Do not start reading me like a book. Not now. Not you. Nathalia's smile softened. I see you, she whispered. All of you. Even the parts you try to bury in lab coats and data. Kamuk's hands clenched, but her breath faltered. She wanted to retreat into the comfort of science, of numbers, of control. But Nathalia's gaze held her, warm and insistent, disarming in a way no one had ever dared. You're dangerous, Kamuk muttered, almost to herself. Not for me. But for anyone who thinks they understand you. And you. Nathalia countered softly. Are you dangerous for thinking you understand me? The banter, the sarcasm, it cracked. The ice around their words fractured, and, suddenly, the tension wasn't only about experiments, protocols, or corporate stakes. It was about the people behind the lab coats, the CEO's suits, the perfectly controlled exteriors. Kamuk's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of it all pressing against her chest. Maybe I am. Maybe I am scared of letting anyone in. Especially someone who sees me. Nathalia's hand hovered near Kamuk's arm, a careful, deliberate bridge across the invisible wall. Then let me see, she said softly. Not because I have the right, but because I want to. Because I care. Kamuk swallowed, her pulse racing. Sarcasm fought for dominance in her mind, but the truth was stronger. Stronger than control. Stronger than fear. I'm not good at this, she admitted quietly, almost a whisper. Neither am I, Nathalia admitted, stepping just a fraction closer. But maybe we can be good at it, together. The words hung in the lab, heavy with possibilities, electric with tension. The machines hummed around them, sterile witnesses to a different kind of experiment, one in trust, vulnerability, and the dangerous, exhilarating bleed of emotion through carefully maintained cracks. Kamuk exhaled, slowly, letting just a hint of the wall come down. Just enough to let Nathalia in, to see that she wasn't impervious, that beneath the steel and the sarcasm, there was a beating, fragile human heart. And for the first time, the Iron CEO didn't step back. She stayed. She waited. She understood. And perhaps, for once, Kamuk didn't have to pretend she could handle it all alone. Chapter 20: The Kiss and Beyond. The lab had gone quiet again, the glow of screens and the low hum of cryo chambers casting long shadows. Kamuk rubbed her temples, trying to process the breakthrough data flashing across her monitor, but something else had hijacked her attention. Something, or rather, someone, standing dangerously close. Nathalia's presence was magnetic, irresistible. The tension between them, simmering for weeks, days, hours, finally snapped. Before Kamuk could think, Nathalia leaned in, lips brushing hers in a kiss that was both commanding and tender. A kiss that spoke of stolen moments, unspoken fear, and long-suppressed desire. Kamuk's mind went blank. Every calculation, every hypothesis, every protocol, all of it evaporated. Hours seemed to pass in that moment, a suspended eternity in the sterile lab. Then, with a sudden gasp, Kamuk pulled back. Hands pressed against Nathalia's chest to create a fragile, trembling barrier. Heart hammering, lungs burning. Time seemed to stretch. Machines hummed like a heartbeat. Outside, London glimmered through the wall-to-ceiling windows, oblivious to the moment unfolding within. Kamuk's mind, usually so precise, so logical, was a chaotic storm, data, fear, and desire colliding in one impossible equation. Then Kamuk pulled back abruptly, pressing her hands against Nathalia's chest. Her lungs burned, her heart raced, and her voice trembled despite her best efforts. I need to breathe," she whispered. Nathalia blinked, momentarily stunned, the shock giving way to an amused, soft smirk. Her fingers lingered against Kamuk's arms, gentle but insistent. "You're cute," Nathalia murmured, low and teasing. "Absolutely, irresistibly cute." Kamuk's voice trembled, barely audible. Kamuk's breath hitched, a blush creeping across her cheeks despite her best professional mask. She opened her mouth to protest, but Nathalia leaned in again, brushing her lips lightly against Kamuk's, letting a soft laughter vibrate against her lips. Kamuk exhaled against her lips, heart still racing, and let herself be pulled into the warmth of it, feeling for the first time that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face her fears alone. Between the hum of machines and the sterile lights, the lab had transformed. No longer just a place of discovery and breakthroughs, but a crucible where two hearts, scarred, guarded, and sarcastic, could finally collide. And in that collision, something fragile and extraordinary began to bloom. This time, the kiss was teasing, playful, yet every touch, every press of lips carried the weight of weeks of tension, of unspoken fears, and of moments that had never dared to exist before. Kamuk felt herself melting, resisting only enough to keep her pride intact, her sarcasm teasing through in a breathless, half-choked, "Do you always invade labs without permission?" Nathalia chuckled, warm and unrelenting, tilting her head to deepen the kiss just slightly. "Only when the experiment is worth it," she whispered against Kamuk's lips, her words sending shivers down Kamuk's spine. Kamuk's hands slid up to rest on Nathalia's shoulders, leaning into the warmth, her sarcasm giving way to an honesty she rarely allowed. "You're dangerous," she admitted, voice almost inaudible, but her body said everything her words could not. "And you," Nathalia breathed, brushing a strand of hair from Kamuk's face, "are worth every calculated risk." For a long moment, the lab was their universe, a mix of cold steel and electric heat, of scientific triumphs and fragile human connection. And in that collision of two storms, something rare and extraordinary bloomed, raw, unguarded, and entirely theirs. Chapter 21. Cold Steel, Warm Hearts. The lab smelled faintly of ozone and antiseptic, a sharp reminder that despite the chaos of human emotion, science still ruled here. Kamuk hovered over the newly activated cryo chamber, checking temperature gradients, reviewing the automated logs, and ensuring the stabilization matrix was functioning perfectly. Every gauge was perfect. Every readout green. The culmination of years of sleepless nights and Nathalia's audacious funding. And yet, Kamuk's mind kept wandering to the kiss. That audacious, dangerous, heart-wrecking kiss. She clenched her jaw and turned her attention back to the chamber, trying to focus on the task at hand rather than the way Nathalia's hands had lingered on her arms, the way her lips had claimed her own. Nathalia leaned casually against the edge of the console, arms crossed, watching Kamuk with a smug little smile that screamed Iron Queen in every line. "You're quiet," Nathalia said, voice smooth, teasing, threading warmth into the chill of the lab. "I'm focusing," Kamuk replied, voice clipped, eyes on the monitors. "Some of us actually care about freezing cells to absolute perfection." Nathalia stepped closer, deliberately slow, heels clicking like a metronome against the polished floor. "And some of us care about making sure the genius behind the chamber doesn't freeze herself out of existence," she said, lifting an eyebrow, voice dipping into silk. Kamuk's fingers twitched over the touchscreen. "I don't need babysitting." "Not babysitting," Nathalia countered, circling to the other side of the chamber. "Oversight. Admiration. You know, whatever keeps your ego intact while I keep this lab from spontaneously combusting under budget cuts." Kamuk's lips quirked in a half-smile, betraying her amusement despite herself. She glanced at Nathalia, then quickly back to the data feed. "You mean, the world's most expensive experiment that you fund entirely but claim no credit?" "Yes," Nathalia said, her grin teasing but confident. "Exactly. But let's be honest, you're pretending that doesn't make you slightly thrilled." Kamuk's pulse betrayed her. Slightly thrilled was a catastrophic understatement. She scowled at the screen. "I am thrilled about the chamber functioning correctly, not about whatever this is between us." Nathalia smirked. "Of course. Professional pride. Very admirable. Still, it doesn't explain that blush earlier." Kamuk's fingers flew over the keyboard, entering calibration commands like her life depended on it. "I don't blush." "Right," Nathalia said, voice softening slightly, almost imperceptibly. She leaned closer to the chamber, watching Kamuk work. "And I suppose that doesn't make your heart beat faster either?" Kamuk finally looked up, jaw tight. "You're testing me." "Not testing," Nathalia said, brushing a finger along the edge of the chamber, close enough that their hands almost touched. "Observing. Caring. Oversight. Did I mention admiration?" Kamuk rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched in spite of herself. "You're insufferable." "And you," Nathalia said, tilting her head, voice dropping to a whisper, "are dangerously tempting." Kamuk's eyes flicked to Nathalia, a mix of annoyance and something hotter, sharper, deeper. She swallowed, glanced at the chamber again, but the data was suddenly meaningless. Her sarcasm was her shield, her pride her armor, but Nathalia had discovered the crux. The little fissures where her heart thumped too fast, where her breath caught too short. The lab was silent for a long beat except for the hum of the machinery, until Nathalia finally stepped back, crossing her arms again, reclaiming her Iron Queen posture. "I'll leave you to your genius," she said. "But remember, I don't take absence of affection as disinterest." Kamuk let out a dry laugh, her voice shaky in spite of herself. "I said I don't blush. I didn't say I wasn't aware of your presence." Nathalia smirked, satisfied. "Noted." She turned toward the exit but paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Try not to let the lab freeze you out of your own heart, Doctor." Kamuk groaned softly, letting her hands fall to the console. She knew the chamber was fully operational. She knew the breakthrough had been achieved. She knew everything about the experiment was under her control. But Nathalia was another equation entirely, one she wasn't sure she could solve. And yet, as the door closed behind the Iron Queen, Kamuk allowed herself a small, private smile, the kind that no boardroom or cryo chamber could ever contain. The lab was theirs: science and sabotage, ambition and desire, cold steel and warm hearts. And Kamuk knew, deep down, that she had never worked under more exhilarating, terrifying, and dangerously beautiful conditions. Chapter 22. The First Trial. The cryo chamber hummed like a sleeping beast, perfectly calibrated and waiting. Kamuk hovered nearby, fingers dancing over the interface, eyes sharp behind her glasses. This was the moment, the culmination of months of sleepless nights, experiments, and Nathalia's relentless funding. Nathalia leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, eyes unreadable, her presence both a comfort and a provocation. "You ready?" she asked, voice low, teasing yet steady. Kamuk didn't answer immediately. Her focus was absolute. Every gauge, every temperature gradient, every minute detail had to be flawless. But somewhere beneath the careful precision, her pulse betrayed her, the memory of their kiss, the friction of their previous interactions, all simmering just beneath the surface. "I'm ready," she said finally, voice clipped. Professional. Detached. The first test was simple, a live sample, carefully frozen, and then thawed to assess cellular viability. It had to be perfect. Nothing less. As the chamber whirred and the frost began to form inside, the quiet tension of the lab was broken by the ping of incoming messages. Kamuk frowned. Her tablet lit up. They had released a media statement, not the complete story, just one that gave the public enough to believe again, but also blood in the water and sharks were drawn. Several of them, some the size of small nations in biotech, were offering her contracts. 5 times, even 10 times the resources Nathalia had committed. And the pitch wasn't subtle. They wanted her innovation, her brain, her heart, in exchange for power and money. Kamuk's eyes narrowed. She swiped through the offers, calculating risk, evaluating opportunity. Every rational part of her wanted to consider the deals. Every instinct screamed, "Don't let them take what you've built." She looked up at Nathalia, who was watching her with that inscrutable expression. The Iron Queen's eyes were sharp, assessing, like she could see the war inside Kamuk's mind. She saw the shift, knew the fear, and calculated the risks already. "I could," Kamuk said slowly, voice steady, but the unspoken edge was clear, "walk away. I could take any of these offers. And yes, they're more than what you've put forward." Nathalia's lips twitched, not with anger, not with indignation, but with interest. And yet, Kamuk took a deep breath, fingers flexing around the tablet. "And yet," she paused, "I don't." Her voice was quiet, but the certainty cut through the hum of the lab like a scalpel. "I am not for sale." The words hung in the air. Nathalia blinked. For the first time in months of business maneuvers, boardroom dominance, and personal games, Nathalia looked genuinely surprised. Kamuk's eyes met hers, unwavering. "I've spent my life chasing answers, not numbers. And whatever this is between us, what we've formed, it's not something I'll gamble away for more zeros on a spreadsheet." Nathalia's expression softened, just enough to see the warmth beneath the Iron Queen facade. The tension in the lab shifted. It wasn't just about the cryo chamber anymore. It wasn't just about breakthrough science. It was about trust. And both of them, Kamuk and Nathalia, were learning that some things, some connections, couldn't be bought. "You're stubborn," Nathalia said finally, voice a whisper now, tinged with admiration, almost fondness. "I prefer determined," Kamuk countered, a dry smile tugging at her lips. Nathalia crossed the lab and leaned casually against the edge of the chamber, close enough for their shoulders to brush. "You're full of surprises, Dr. Jivacate." "I like that." "Very much." Kamuk's breath hitched slightly. She busied herself with the interface, but her pulse betrayed her. Their proximity, the intimacy of shared victory, the subtle acknowledgement of their bond, it was all too much, and not nearly enough at the same time. The chamber beeped, signaling the end of the first test. Kamuk ran the readouts. Perfect. Flawless. The cells had survived, unchanged, pristine. She allowed herself a small, victorious smile, though her gaze flicked to Nathalia, who returned it with an almost imperceptible smirk. "The first of many," Kamuk said, her voice softer now, just enough to let Nathalia hear. "And we'll face them together," Nathalia replied. "All of them. Boardrooms, competitors, or just life." Kamuk allowed herself a private, fleeting warmth to creep through her chest. This was the beginning of more than just scientific breakthroughs. This was the beginning of something neither of them had expected: mutual respect, admiration, and maybe, slowly, trust. And maybe, just maybe, the storm between them was starting to feel like home. Chapter 23: Lab Hours and Heartbeats. The hum of the cryo chamber filled the lab like a heartbeat. Kamuk Jivacate moved around the instruments with precision, fingers gliding across touchscreens, checking calibrations, adjusting controls. Every movement measured, every glance deliberate. Nathalia leaned against a counter across from her, arms crossed, watching, not interfering, but there was something in the tilt of her head, the way her eyes tracked Kamuk, that made Kamuk's chest tighten. "You really do thrive in chaos," Nathalia said lightly, breaking the quiet. Her tone wasn't teasing exactly. It was observation, like she was reading a book she couldn't put down. Kamuk didn't look up. "I thrive in precision," she muttered, voice low, dry. "Chaos usually ends in broken cells and lawsuits." Nathalia laughed softly, the sound warm and deliberate, like sunlight through glass. But that's only if you let it." Kamuk's fingers stilled for a beat. She didn't need to turn to know Nathalia's gaze was on her, burning just beneath the surface of casual. "I don't let anything in." "That's what makes this so entertaining," Nathalia said, finally stepping closer, slow, measured, her heels clicking softly on the tile. "You in control. Always calculating. Never giving me, or anyone, the satisfaction of knowing what's really going on in here, but I am patient." Kamuk Jivacate, very patient. Kamuk's jaw tightened. She turned back to the monitors, pretending to focus on the readouts, though her pulse betrayed her. Every nerve in her body was alive, aware, prickling at Nathalia's proximity. "You know," Nathalia said, voice softer now, intimate, "I don't need to know everything. I just need to be allowed to watch. To be here. Without causing problems." Kamuk's fingers paused mid-swipe. She swallowed, dry. "I don't do that well," she admitted quietly, "not even with people I trust." "And yet," Nathalia said, stepping closer, "you let me in. Little by little." The words hit harder than any critique, harder than any scientific failure ever could. Kamuk's throat constricted, and she exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. "Don't make it weird," she muttered, turning back to the chamber. Nathalia's lips twitched. "You do that too well, Dr. Jivacate." They worked side by side in silence for a while, calibrating the chamber, running secondary tests, and noting each anomaly. Every brush of shoulder, every shared glance, was charged with an energy neither fully understood or was ready to name. Kamuk adjusted a dial, and Nathalia's hand hovered near the panel. Their fingers brushed. A spark, subtle but undeniable. Kamuk froze. Nathalia didn't pull back. She just watched Kamuk's reaction, a small, knowing smile curling at the corners of her lips. "Ignore it," Kamuk said, almost to herself, voice tight. "I don't want to," Nathalia replied softly, and her gaze lingered, warm and challenging, daring Kamuk to confront the unspoken. Kamuk exhaled and forced herself to focus on the chamber. She reminded herself of protocols, procedures, and the months of work that hung in the balance. She could not, would not, let the distraction ruin this. Yet every so often, her eyes flicked to Nathalia. Every subtle movement, every lean against the counter, felt intimate, purposeful, teasing. And it was maddening. By the time the test cycle ended, the chamber had passed with flying colors. The readouts confirmed stability, perfect cell preservation, and integrity across every parameter. The breakthrough was real and undeniable. Kamuk allowed herself a rare smile, a soft exhale of relief and satisfaction. Nathalia stepped closer, her presence constant, unwavering, and something shifted, a subtle acknowledgement of the connection that had begun, still fragile, still unspoken, yet impossible to ignore. "First real test complete," Kamuk said, tone dry but with a hint of warmth she didn't quite hide. "First of many," Nathalia murmured, close enough for Kamuk to feel the warmth radiating off her. "And I'll be here for all of them." Kamuk glanced up, eyes meeting Nathalia's. And for a heartbeat, the sarcasm faded, leaving something soft, something dangerous, something that felt a lot like trust. But just for a moment. Kamuk's guard snapped back into place, her voice leveling. "Don't think this means anything." Nathalia's smile widened, teasing, victorious, but not cruel. "Oh, I don't think. I know." And with that, they turned back to the chamber, side by side, the unspoken tension between them crackling like static, but now, quietly, warmly, theirs. Chapter 24. Gala Sparks and Whispered Tongues. The gala hall glittered like the Thames at midnight, chandeliers dripping with crystals, light bouncing in all directions. Stormpoint International had spared no expense, celebrating the first successful full-cycle cryotest, a scientific achievement years in the making. Cryogenics moved through the crowd with practiced grace, lab coat swapped for a sleek, midnight blue dress that fell just above her knees. Understatement was her armor, even here, even tonight. Nathalia Krusenstolp, in a sharply tailored black gown with a slit daring enough to challenge gravity, trailed close behind, an elegant shadow, eyes always just a fraction ahead, scanning the room. "Kamuk, don't be invisible," Nathalia said softly, voice low, carrying a warmth she didn't offer often in public. "People are here to celebrate you, not your humility." Kamuk's lips quirked. "I prefer celebrating quietly. Subtlety is underrated." Nathalia smirked. "You? Subtle? Darling, the whole lab would argue otherwise." They shared a brief, private smile, one that made Nathalia's chest tighten despite herself. But before the moment could stretch, a voice cut through the hum of champagne glasses and string quartets. "Kamuk." The name, accented but familiar, made her heart skip. She turned sharply. A man in a tailored suit, dark eyes, confident stance, was making his way toward her. Recognition hit. "Liang," Kamuk whispered, nearly dropping her flute of sparkling water. "Kamuk," he replied, rapid Mandarin rolling off his tongue, words punctuated with a warmth and teasing familiarity that made Nathalia stiffen. Kamuk answered, equally fast, her Mandarin flowing effortlessly, her hands gesturing, her voice animated. Their conversation was private, a rapid-fire exchange of jokes, jabs, and old memories that made Kamuk laugh, genuinely, without restraint. Nathalia watched from a step back. The jealousy pricked her chest like icy needles. She didn't understand every word, but the tone, the intimacy, the warmth, the shared history, was unmistakable. Kamuk glanced at Nathalia mid-sentence, her eyes catching Nathalia's for just a second. She offered a brief, apologetic smile before returning to Liang, her hands animated, her laughter flowing. "You two know each other?" Nathalia finally asked, her voice calm but laced with steel, stepping closer. Kamuk's response was hesitant, measured. "Liang is an old, university friend. A long time ago. Nothing more." Liang grinned, recognizing the tension. Nathalia, you must be the Iron Queen everyone warned me about." He said it lightly, teasingly, but Nathalia's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Kamuk, sensing Nathalia's reaction, finally ended the Mandarin conversation with a smooth, professional pivot. "Liang, we'll catch up later. Tonight's about the team. Thank you for coming." Liang nodded, understanding, though a playful spark lingered in his eyes. He melted back into the crowd. Nathalia's gaze lingered on Kamuk. The tight curve of her lips betrayed more than the words she let escape. "I see how easily you let old flames light a room," she murmured, tone teasing but dangerous. Kamuk raised a brow, playful deflection ready. "Old flames don't burn me. They just remind me why I focus." Nathalia smirked, stepping closer. "Focus, huh? On science or something else?" Kamuk's heartbeat betrayed her, ears warming, as she managed a dry, sardonic chuckle. "Science. Always science." And yet, Nathalia could feel the heat of her pulse, the subtle shift in posture, the vulnerability Kamuk tried so hard to hide. The Iron Queen's jealousy simmered beneath the surface, but so did admiration. This woman, brilliant and fiercely independent, captivated her in ways no rival could. The gala continued around them, laughter, champagne, applause, but in that corner, near the gleaming cryo display, two storms brewed quietly, tangled in old memories, whispered Mandarin, and the undeniable pull of something neither dared to name just yet. Chapter 25, Glances, Sparks, and Subtle Wars. The gala had not slowed, but the music softened as the orchestra moved into a smoother, more intimate set. Kamuk stood near a display of the newly commissioned cryo chamber prototypes, wine flute in hand, giving the appearance of calm authority. Nathalia drifted closer, heels clicking softly against the marble floor, every step deliberate, each one claiming more space in Kamuk's periphery. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she watched, studying the way Kamuk held herself, poised, yet undeniably on edge after the encounter with Liang. "You seemed very engaged earlier," Nathalia murmured, her voice low enough for only Kamuk to hear, the corner of her lips tilting with that dangerous half-smile. Kamuk didn't look up immediately. She sipped her wine, letting the seconds stretch, her eyes flicking only briefly toward Nathalia. "Engaged?" she echoed, dryly, but not quite masking the faint warmth that lingered in her chest. "Yes," Nathalia said, stepping closer. Her presence pressed against Kamuk's personal bubble, close enough to feel her pulse. Laughing, leaning in, whispering in Mandarin-like secrets that didn't include me. Kamuk finally met her gaze. Cool, sarcastic, sharp, but with the slightest tremor Nathalia didn't miss. "Secrets," she said, voice playful, "are important for research purposes. We call it data segregation." Nathalia chuckled softly, the sound low and amused, not mocking. She leaned against the edge of the display, arms crossed, letting Kamuk feel the unspoken challenge. "Data segregation, huh? I've heard worse excuses for flirting." Kamuk's lip twitched, trying not to smile. "Flirtation isn't exactly my variable of interest. Science is." Nathalia tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Science? Really? I watched you laugh with him. That wasn't science." Kamuk's heartbeat skipped, and she took a measured sip, holding Nathalia's gaze like a challenge. "Observation," she countered. "Merely observation." A moment of silence hung in the air, thick with tension neither would name, as if the space between them had condensed into something tangible. Then Nathalia's voice dropped just slightly, teasing but edged with warmth. "Observation can be dangerous, Doctor. Some subjects react unexpectedly." Kamuk's cheeks warmed. She set down her wine glass, crossing her arms not entirely for defense. "I'm highly controlled," she said, with a hint of a smirk that betrayed the lie. Nathalia stepped closer, close enough that the soft scent of cedar and jasmine threaded into the sterile, polished air. "Highly controlled subjects," she said, low, deliberate, "tend to be the most interesting ones." Kamuk swallowed. Quick. Shaking her head, she glanced away, trying to reclaim her composure. "I'm not for sale, if that's what you're insinuating." Nathalia laughed softly, the kind that touched something in Kamuk's chest and made her want to argue and retreat at the same time. "Oh, I never thought otherwise. Just testing variables." The corners of Kamuk's lips lifted, almost unwillingly. "And how many times have you run this experiment?" Nathalia's grin widened. "Not nearly enough," she said. Then, softly, almost a whisper, "But the results are promising." Kamuk felt the heat crawl up her neck. A small, almost imperceptible pulse of desire, mixed with fear, teased at her restraint. "Promising," she repeated, voice dry, but tinged with something Nathalia couldn't miss. "Very promising," Nathalia confirmed, stepping back slightly, letting the tension linger, giving Kamuk the illusion of space while still claiming the atmosphere around her. And in that charged corner of the gala, between crystal lights and champagne, the battle of sarcasm and flirtation, the dance of power and vulnerability, and the pull of unspoken desire, both women realized neither of them was leaving without results. Chapter 26: Gala Lights and Hidden Challenges. The gala had settled into its rhythm, a polished waltz of champagne flutes, soft murmurs of conversation, and the glitter of chandeliers reflecting on polished marble floors. Kamuk drifted along the perimeter, keeping an eye on the displays of cryotechnology while trying to remain invisible, her preference in any social situation. But Nathalia didn't blend in. She moved like a queen among her court, heels clicking with purpose, scanning the room with blue eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Every glance she threw in Kamuk's direction was measured, teasing, and deliberate, and Kamuk felt herself adjusting without admitting it. A sudden cheer rose near the center of the room. A scientist from another team had unveiled a new variant of a cryo interface, a subtle improvement, but still not as efficient as hers. Kamuk's attention snapped to it. This, she muttered under her breath, is the real competition. Nathalia appeared beside her, silent, eyes following the same display. I see why you care so much, she said softly. Every detail matters to you. Kamuk swallowed the warmth in her chest. It does, she said, voice clipped but not unkind. This isn't about money or fame. It's about the work and the lives it could touch. A small, almost imperceptible smirk lifted Nathalia's lips. And yet you hide behind sarcasm and deflection whenever someone compliments you. Kamuk glanced away, one eyebrow lifting, trying to regain control. I hide behind chemistry. Chemistry, Nathalia echoed, voice low and teasing, as if testing a theory. She leaned slightly closer, just enough that Kamuk could feel the heat radiating off her. I'd call it something else. Kamuk's pulse quickened. She refocused on the display on the glowing interface, the fine wiring, the meticulously arranged cryo chambers, but her peripheral vision betrayed her, catching Nathalia's figure lingering, watching, patient but present. And then came the announcement that cut through the ambient music and polite applause. Dr. Jivacate, the gala host called, we are honored to invite you to demonstrate the first functional cryo chamber tonight. All eyes turned toward Kamuk. A flush crept up her neck. I didn't expect, she started, stammering for the first time that evening. Expect? Nathalia murmured from behind her, voice soft, almost intimate. You don't do expect. You do. Kamuk's hands trembled slightly as she walked toward the chamber. She pulled a glove on, her usual methodical movements slowing only for the rhythm of her heartbeat, an unexpected variable Nathalia seemed to notice. The demonstration began. The chamber lit up, sensors aligning perfectly, the hum of energy pulsing through the glass enclosure. Kamuk narrated calmly, precisely, explaining the cryo protocols while technicians monitored the interface. Every command, every adjustment, was a subtle dance of control and focus. Nathalia watched silently, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at her lips. Her gaze never left Kamuk, not for a second. It wasn't just admiration, there was a question there, a challenge, a curiosity. As the cryo interface stabilized, a faint alarm flickered, an error that would normally trigger panic. Kamuk's fingers flew across the controls, correcting it with split-second precision. The crowd barely noticed the hiccup. Nathalia's laugh was quiet, almost approving. You make saving lives look effortless, she said, voice close enough for Kamuk to feel the vibration. Kamuk swallowed, forcing a smirk. Effortless isn't in my vocabulary. Yet, Nathalia murmured, tilting her head, you somehow make it intoxicating. Kamuk's eyes widened, caught between irritation, embarrassment, and an awareness she wasn't ready to name. She turned back to the chamber, finishing the demonstration with precision, though her mind now raced faster than the system she controlled. When the applause finally came, it was polite, respectful, but the tension between her and Nathalia had deepened into something unsaid, something promising. Nathalia stayed close, a shadow that felt warmer than any spotlight, a presence that made Kamuk's sarcasm falter, just a fraction. The gala faded into the background. For a moment, there was only the lab, the chamber, and the quiet, dangerous pull of two people learning to navigate the fine line between power, vulnerability, and desire. Chapter 27: Balcony Confessions and the Pull of Trust. The gala had wound down. The clinking of glasses and low hum of conversation had retreated behind closed doors, leaving the rooftop balcony bathed in moonlight. London stretched endlessly below, glittering like spilled diamonds across the dark river. Kamuk leaned on the railing, coat wrapped tightly around her, pretending to observe the skyline. But she was only half looking. The other half of her mind replayed Nathalia's every move, every word, the subtle heat of her presence lingering in the room even after she had disappeared into the gala crowd. You're quiet, Nathalia's voice said behind her. Soft, teasing, yet edged with something deeper. Kamuk startled, hands tightening on the railing. I am not, she replied quickly. I'm just calculating trajectories. Nathalia chuckled, a low, teasing sound that brushed against Kamuk's nerves like silk. Trajectories, huh? Planning the perfect escape. Kamuk shot her a look over her shoulder, sarcasm ready, but Nathalia's gaze stopped her mid-sentence. There was no teasing now, only intensity, a quiet command that made Kamuk's pulse race. I'm not leaving, Nathalia said, stepping closer. The scent of cedar and jasmine, subtle but intoxicating, drifted toward Kamuk. And I think you're not either. Kamuk tried to retreat into her usual armor, but the words, the closeness, the warmth, it was harder to hide. She could feel Nathalia's hand hover just short of hers, and for once, the impulse to pull back felt weak. Dangerous. I can't, Kamuk started, but Nathalia closed the distance, lips brushing hers in a kiss that was sudden, demanding, and exquisite. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was the kind of kiss that made Kamuk forget the world, the lab, the cameras, the scrutiny. Hours felt like seconds, breaths entangled, the city lights blurring beneath them. Finally, Kamuk pushed back, just enough to create space, but enough to feel the ache of wanting more. You scare me, she whispered, voice tight. Nathalia blinked, momentarily shocked, but then laughed softly, warmth threading through the sound. You're still so cute, she said, almost tenderly. Then, without hesitation, she leaned in and kissed Kamuk again, slower this time, letting her lips linger, testing the boundaries, daring Kamuk to fight less. Kamuk's hands clenched the railing, a battle of reason versus desire. She didn't want to fall, not fully. Not yet. But Nathalia didn't ask permission. She simply commanded trust with her presence, her kiss, her patience. You don't have to fight this, Nathalia murmured, voice low, brushing a strand of hair from Kamuk's face. Trust me. Kamuk's heart thudded violently, and for the first time, she considered it. The fortress she had built around herself, sarcasm, deflection, distance, it was cracking. Slowly. Terrifyingly. Deliciously. And she wasn't sure she wanted to fix it. The night held them there, standing together on the balcony, two storms finding the first hint of calm in each other. In the glittering silence of London below, they let themselves linger in the unspoken, in the promise that perhaps trust, and something deeper, was finally possible. Chapter 28. Surrendering to the Storm. The lab was quiet. Sterile, humming with the steady pulse of cryo-chambers and the faint mechanical sigh of life preserved in frozen time. The chaos of the gala and the city lights felt like a world away. Only the two of them remained, Kamuk and Nathalia, standing closer than professional distance would allow, both acutely aware of the electricity that had been crackling between them for months and the kiss at the gala. Kamuk's hands hovered over the keyboard, pretending to check the system logs, while her eyes kept drifting to Nathalia. Every movement she made, every tilt of her head, drew Kamuk in like a magnet she wasn't sure she wanted to surrender to. Nathalia, in turn, observed her with a patience that was almost infuriating. She didn't need words. She had already said everything with the light in her eyes, the subtle way she leaned into Kamuk's space, the gentle brush of her fingers when she handed over a tablet. Finally, the dam broke. Kamuk set the tablet down, took a deep breath, and turned fully to Nathalia. Stop, pretending you don't feel it either, she said, voice low, trembling, but still edged with defiance. Nathalia's smirk softened, and she stepped closer, until the distance between them was negligible. Pretending, she asked, tilting her head. Kamuk. I've felt it from the very beginning. Kamuk's chest tightened. She wanted to resist, to fight, to protect herself with sarcasm and reason. But every rational thought dissolved under the weight of Nathalia's gaze. The walls she'd built around her heart trembled, cracked, and finally collapsed. And then, slowly, deliberately, Nathalia leaned in. This time, there was no teasing, no hesitation. Kamuk didn't stop her. She let herself melt into the kiss, let herself respond to the heat, the taste, the intoxicating certainty that had been missing in her life for too long. Hours could have passed, minutes, seconds, time didn't matter. What mattered was the surrender, The mutual recognition that the tension, the sarcasm, the teasing, the boundaries, none of it could contain what was between them. When they finally broke apart, faces flushed, breaths tangled, Kamuk whispered, almost against her will, This changes everything." Nathalia laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from Kamuk's face. "Yes," she said, voice low, warm. "But not in the way you think. Not the lab, not the cryogenics. Us. Us changes everything." Kamuk's lips twitched into the tiniest of smiles, the first real one Nathalia had seen in weeks. She wanted to argue, to hide, to retreat, but the truth was undeniable. Every fear, every sarcasm, every self-imposed rule had melted away under Nathalia's insistence, under her own desire. "You're dangerous," Kamuk said finally, voice half laugh, half breath. "And you?" Nathalia teased, eyes sparkling. "Cute, defiant, brilliant, irresistibly dangerous." Kamuk rolled her eyes, but her smile deepened. "Fine," she admitted softly. "Maybe I'm willing to take the risk." Nathalia's grin widened, victorious but tender. "Good. Because so am I." The lab lights hummed quietly, the cryo chambers steady and alive, a testament to their shared obsession. Outside, London continued its relentless glow, but inside, in that sterile, humming world of science and possibility, two storms had finally collided, and for the first time, they let themselves burn together. Chapter 29: Nightfall Surrenders. The city outside Kamuk's apartment hummed with life, distant sirens and neon reflections painting the walls with color. But inside, it was silent, save for the quickening heartbeat in Kamuk's chest. She had tried to focus on her notes, her neural pathways, her cryogenics simulations, but her thoughts betrayed her every time, looping around Nathalia. A knock at the door made her jump, and when she opened it, there she was. Nathalia. Commanding, alluring, the Iron Queen who could reduce a room to molten desire with a single glance. But now here, in the quiet amber glow of Kamuk's apartment, she seemed almost vulnerable, almost human. "May I come in?" Nathalia asked, voice low, warm, teasing, the sort of tone that promised storms. I thought you were at your penthouse." Kamuk stammered, caught off guard by the audacity and closeness. "I thought I'd check on my favorite scientist," Nathalia replied, stepping in without waiting. Her sweater hung loosely over her shoulders, softening the hard lines Kamuk had come to associate with her, yet the aura of control remained. Kamuk's meticulously maintained defenses trembled. "This is highly irregular," she muttered, a blush creeping up her neck. Nathalia smiled knowingly, closing the door behind her. "Then we'll have to make it highly worth it." Kamuk stepped back instinctively, but Nathalia mirrored her, advancing with deliberate, hypnotic grace. They stopped just inches apart, breaths mingling, the electricity between them crackling in the quiet apartment. "You fight me," Nathalia whispered, almost teasing, almost fierce. "And I love that about you. But you can't fight this." Kamuk let out a soft laugh, shaky and uncertain. I'm not sure I even want to fight anymore," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. That was all Nathalia needed. One hand cupped Kamuk's cheek, firm and warm, while the other threaded through her hair. Their lips met in a kiss, slow at first, testing, tasting, savoring. Then, as resistance melted, the kiss deepened, hungry, demanding, yet tender, a paradox that mirrored their dynamic. Kamuk responded without hesitation, letting her hands explore the strength of Nathalia's chest, feeling the pulse beneath the fabric. Every careful barrier, every sarcastic shield, dissolved in the heat of this intimate collision. When their lips parted, it was only a moment before Nathalia's forehead rested against Kamuk's, their breaths mingling. "You think you can resist me?" she murmured, the tease in her voice a spark on dry kindling. Kamuk's fingers traced Nathalia's jawline, trembling slightly. I shouldn't. I'm not good at this," she admitted. Her sarcasm faltered, replaced by raw vulnerability she had long denied. Nathalia's smile softened, and she pressed a gentle kiss to Kamuk's temple, lingering. "You're better than you think," she said quietly. "And you don't have to be good at this alone." Kamuk shivered, leaning into the touch, the warmth and the command intertwining. Desire, trust, and fear mingled in the space between them. She realized that this wasn't just a physical surrender, it was a letting go of control, of walls she had built for years. Nathalia's hands traced Kamuk's arms, moving slowly, reverently, memorizing every inch of tension and release. Kamuk's breath hitched as she tilted her head back, giving in fully to the sensation, to the closeness, to the quiet storm that Nathalia embodied. And then, when their lips met again, it was different, longer, deeper, a fusion of fire and warmth that consumed and protected at once. Kamuk wrapped her arms around Nathalia, holding on, needing the solid weight, the certainty beneath her hands. When they finally broke apart, breaths mingling, Kamuk murmured, voice hoarse, You just don't stop, do you?" Nathalia laughed softly, brushing a thumb over Kamuk's lips. "Not when it comes to you." Kamuk's walls, the sarcasm, the shields, they were all gone. For a fleeting, terrifying, perfect moment, she let herself feel everything: desire, trust, longing, and the promise of something dangerous and beautiful. "Maybe. I don't want you to stop," Kamuk admitted, lips curving into a soft, unguarded smile. Nathalia leaned in again, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to Kamuk's lips, then to her neck, whispering, "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." Outside, London shimmered like a sea of stars, oblivious to the private hurricane within Kamuk's apartment. Inside, two hearts collided and surrendered in a dance of passion, intimacy, and trust, each finding in the other a refuge neither expected, but both needed desperately. Kamuk finally let herself breathe, not just the air, but the overwhelming, intoxicating presence of Nathalia Krusenstolp, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch. Chapter 30. The morning after. Light seeped softly through the half-closed blinds, painting Kamuk's apartment in muted gold. The city beyond hummed, unaware of the quiet revolution taking place inside. Kamuk stirred beneath the tangled sheets, a half-smile tugging at her lips as the events of the previous night replayed in her mind, electric, intimate, undeniable. A soft sound made her eyes flutter open. Nathalia. Leaning against the doorframe, one hand casually resting on the frame, the other holding a steaming mug of coffee. Her hair was still slightly mussed from sleep, the pristine Iron Queen facade softened into something approachable, almost domestic. Kamuk's chest tightened. "You made coffee?" she asked, voice rough from sleep and something else entirely, something more tender. "I did," Nathalia replied, stepping into the room, her movements measured but unhurried, as if she owned the morning as easily as she owned the boardroom. "And I wasn't about to let my favorite scientist survive the morning without it." Kamuk sat up, tugging the sheets around her, attempting to reclaim some sense of dignity. "Right. Because coffee and whatever this is fixes everything." She waved vaguely between them. Nathalia smirked, setting the mug on the nightstand. "Don't sell yourself short. I already know it fixes you, at least partially." Kamuk blinked, a flush rising to her cheeks. She opened her mouth to respond, then paused. What could she say? Last night had changed something, but sarcasm was still her armor. Still, it cracked. "So, morning routines, then," Kamuk said finally, trying to regain her trademark dry edge. "Or do Iron Queens drink coffee in bed and plot world domination?" "Sometimes both," Nathalia replied, tilting her head, her grin teasing, eyes sharp. "But this morning, I figured we start with coffee and conversation." Kamuk groaned softly, burying her face in the pillow, muttering, "Why is it that you always make everything complicated?" "Because you make everything interesting," Nathalia countered, moving closer. She perched on the edge of the bed, close enough that Kamuk could feel the warmth radiating from her. "And besides," she let her voice drop, playful, intimate, "I like it when you're flustered." Kamuk rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling, trying to act unaffected. "Well, congratulations. You've succeeded." Consider me flustered. Happy now. I thrive on it, Nathalia said softly, reaching over to brush a strand of hair from Kimuk's face. Her fingers lingered, tracing the line of Kimuk's jaw, thumb grazing her lips. But don't think for a second that flustered means defeated. You're mine this morning, but I know better than to think I have you completely. Kimuk's hand shot up, gripping Nathalia's wrist gently. Careful, Krisenstalp. You forget, I fight back. Nathalia laughed, low and rich, leaning in so close their noses almost touched. I wouldn't dream of forgetting. And you make me want to fight. The air thickened between them, tension coiled with desire, but tempered by laughter and familiarity. Kimuk felt herself relax into it, the edges of her control softening, while still maintaining a trace of her usual defiance. Coffee first, Kimuk said firmly, voice playful but steady. Then plotting world domination. Or whatever it is you do when you're not charming scientists into catastrophic vulnerability. Nathalia's smile softened, almost tender this time. Deal. But consider this a warning. She tapped lightly on Kimuk's chest. I plan to take my time. Kimuk groaned again, this time less sarcastic and more willing. You always do. The morning stretched, slow and languid, filled with coffee, small touches, laughter, and lingering glances. The world outside could wait. Inside, two storms had collided and found a fragile, exhilarating calm. And neither of them wanted to break it, not yet. Chapter 31. Navigating Bold Affections at Work. The first morning back at the lab, Kimuk felt the tension before she even unlocked the door. Not the usual nerves of experiments, data integrity, or the ever-looming threat of a sabotaged cryochamber. No, this was different. This was Nathalia. She stepped inside, already aware of the faint scent that seemed to trail the CEO everywhere, cedar, jasmine, power, and her pulse hitched before she could hide it. Morning, doctor, came Nathalia's voice from the far end of the lab, low, teasing, confident. Her heels clicked against the polished floor like a metronome synced to Kimuk's heartbeat. Kimuk clenched her jaw, dragging a hand through her hair. Morning, she said dryly, attempting to sound professional. And please, no sudden heart attacks via entrance today. Nathalia raised a single eyebrow, crossing the lab floor slowly, hands behind her back like some benevolent overlord. You don't like being noticed, Dr. Jivacate, she said, voice soft but teasing. And yet, here I am, making sure everyone sees exactly who you belong to. Kimuk felt her face heat. I don't, she cut herself off, realizing the entire team was now staring. Mara, her lead tech, looked both horrified and thoroughly entertained. The others were whispering, trying not to laugh, but failing. Nathalia's smirk widened. Exactly. Kimuk exhaled, muttering under her breath. Great. Let's start the morning humiliation early, shall we? She moved toward the control panels, trying to focus. The cryochambers hummed like obedient beasts. The experiments were progressing flawlessly, better than ever. And yet, the awareness that Nathalia was there, unflinching in her attention, made her hands tremble slightly. Doctor, Nathalia said, stepping closer, brushing a hand lightly along Kimuk's shoulder as she leaned over to inspect a data readout. Kimuk caught the touch, swallowed hard, and pretended she wasn't acutely aware of it. You know, Nathalia continued, tone-teasing, I could supervise all of this from my office, but I prefer to watch you closely. Kimuk snorted, hiding a blush behind her tablet. Is this part of StormPoint's new productivity initiative? Mandatory CEO proximity for maximum output. Nathalia's laugh was low, genuine, and it wrapped around Kimuk's defenses like silk. Something like that. But consider it mentorship. Kimuk shook her head, muttering, mentorship from a goddess. Perfect. Hours passed, experiments ran smoother than ever, and Kimuk began to notice something subtle. The lab had a rhythm now that it never had before. Mara whispered later, it's like, she's protecting you. Making sure nothing interrupts your flow. Kimuk's lips twitched in the faintest smile, catching Nathalia watching from across the lab. That bold, unflinching gaze that said, you're mine. And I will ensure your world is safe. A hand brushed hers as Nathalia handed her a tablet. Kamuk froze, their fingers lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. The team averted their eyes discreetly, though several had caught the electricity in the room. Kamuk exhaled slowly. "Fine. I admit it," she muttered, voice low, only Nathalia could hear. You being here, it's effective. Don't let it go to your head." Nathalia leaned closer, close enough that Kamuk felt her warmth, and whispered, "I don't need it to go to my head. I only need you to stop pretending you can resist it." Kamuk rolled her eyes, but couldn't hide the small, reluctant smile tugging at her lips. "We'll see about that." The rest of the day was a blend of focus and subtle distractions, gestures, touches, glances. Kamuk realized that she didn't mind. Not at all. And for the first time, she felt the lab's pulse not just through the machines, but through their intertwined presence. By the evening, as the lab emptied and the city lights began to twinkle outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Nathalia lingered by Kamuk's workstation, hands in her pockets. "You did well today," she said softly, voice low and intimate. "And I liked seeing you, unfazed by everyone else, even when they noticed." Kamuk let out a breath, finally relaxing against the chair. "You mean, I didn't embarrass myself completely?" Nathalia's smile softened into something warmer, more personal. "Not at all. You were remarkable." Kamuk's pulse quickened again, and despite herself, she felt the subtle, thrilling tug of surrender, not fully, not yet, but enough. Enough to know that the lab, their work, and the bond between them were stronger than any protocol, any experiment, any barrier. And Kamuk knew deep down that trying to resist this Iron Queen would be the hardest experiment of all. Epilogue, Legacy in Sync. The city lights of London stretched below the Storm Point Tower like a constellation built of glass and ambition. Inside, the lab hummed with quiet precision, the cryo chambers fully functional, monitored, and humming in perfect sync with the pulse of their creators. Kamuk Jivacate leaned against the central console, eyes scanning data with practiced ease. Beside her, Nathalia Krusenstolp lounged casually on the edge of a counter, arms crossed, a smirk teasing her lips. "You're staring again," Nathalia said, voice low, teasing. "I hope it's at the data and not at me." Kamuk didn't even look up. "Would it matter if it was?" "It would," Nathalia replied sharply, though the corners of her mouth betrayed amusement. "Because, Doctor, I have plans for this lab. Plans that do not include you getting distracted by me every 5 seconds." Kamuk finally lifted her gaze, eyes locking with Nathalia's. The sarcasm in her tone didn't mask the warmth behind it. "I assure you, my focus is impeccable. I am a consummate professional." Nathalia's smirk widened, a sparkle in her gaze. "Ah, yes, the consummate professional who nearly melted last week when I leaned too close to check the alignment on Chamber 6. Kamuk rolled her eyes, hiding a chuckle behind her hand. "I maintain, it was a minor lapse in judgment. Professional, still." They both laughed, the sound a rare harmony of sarcasm and comfort. It had taken months of tension, breakthroughs, sabotage, and stolen kisses to arrive here, but they had. The lab, once a kingdom of glass and impossible budgets, now felt like a home. A fortress. A testament to their brilliance, to their stubbornness, and to a bond forged in fire, fear, and unwavering determination. Kamuk set down her tablet, finally letting herself exhale. "Do you know," she said quietly, "I was terrified. Not of failure, not really. But of what it would mean if all of this, if I couldn't be saved." Nathalia stepped closer, letting her hand graze Kamuk's shoulder. "You don't have to be scared anymore. We've saved it, not just the lab, the cryo project, the research, but us. All of it." Kamuk's lips twitched into a small, genuine smile. "Even you." Nathalia laughed softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Kamuk's face. "Especially me. I am your chaos, your challenge, and yes, your Iron Queen. But also, your partner in everything that matters. And I wouldn't have it any other way." Kamuk tilted her head, eyes narrowing playfully. "Careful, Krusenstolp. You're getting dangerously sentimental." "Careful, Jivacate," Nathalia shot back, sarcasm perfectly in rhythm. "You're dangerously cute when you pretend not to be." They stood there, letting the hum of the lab, the glow of the monitors, and the twinkle of city lights outside wash over them. The banter, the teasing, the constant push and pull, it hadn't disappeared. In fact, it had sharpened, refined into a dance only they could perform. And yet beneath it all was certainty. The research was thriving, the cryo chambers operational, and their legacy, both scientific and personal, was secure. Kamuk exhaled, letting herself lean into Nathalia. So, we're really doing this. Together. All of it. Nathalia pressed a quick, possessive kiss to her temple, smirk softening. All of it. And trust me, you're not getting rid of me now. Kamuk grinned, shaking her head, but her hand found Nathalia's, fingers interlacing naturally. Good. Because I think I'd actually miss the chaos. And I, Nathalia said, voice low and teasing, would miss the brilliant, stubborn scientist who keeps me on my toes and occasionally makes me blush. Kamuk rolled her eyes, laughter in her chest. You're insufferable. But you love me, Nathalia countered, lips twitching in that infuriating, charming way. Kamuk sighed, finally admitting it in the only way she could, with a smirk and a shake of her head. Unfortunately, yes. The kiss was soft at first, but then deepened and Kamuk melted into Nathalia. The only place she felt safe and, for the first time in very long, happy. And so, in the lab that had witnessed the storm of their ambitions, fears, and stolen moments, the Iron Queen and the brilliant bioscientist, perfectly in sync. Their love sharp, witty, and blazing bright, and their legacy, immortalized in glass, ice, and fire, would endure long after the lights of London dimmed. The lab hummed, the city gleamed, and for once, the world outside could wait. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.